Good morning. Welcome to the California Transportation Commission, day one of our commission meetings. It is October 13th, and we are delighted to have you here. I would like to start with Douglas Remedios presenting information as to how the public participates in this meeting today, and then proceeding to a roll call. Thank you, Douglas.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Welcome to everyone, members of the public. Welcome to the October 2021 CTC virtual meeting. Please note that because this is a two-day meeting, you will need to use a separate link to attend the meeting tomorrow. The links can be found on the first page of the meeting agenda on our website. Please use the questions tab if you have questions about this. The CTC exists to make transportation planning, funding, and policy more understandable and accountable. Our meetings normally take place in diverse locations around the state so that commissioners can see firsthand the variety of infrastructure issues around California. However, containment measures surrounding COVID-19 have required us to adjust to a webinar format. Please bear with us should we encounter any technical challenges. The Commission's meeting agenda is located on our website, www.catc.ca.gov, and can be downloaded and saved during this webinar. Live closed captioning, Spanish language, and American language translations are being provided for this meeting. You can access these services through links found on our meetings page and by using the web camera features on the screen in front of you. Commissioners, should you have any questions or comments during the meeting, please let us know by raising your hand or otherwise get our attention on camera and wait for the chair to call on you. You can also send inquiries and comments through the questions tab and that can be read to presenters on behalf and the audience on your behalf. Please mute your microphones except when you intend to speak to minimize outside noise and feedback. The chair will do her best to call on each of you in turn. We hope you will turn on your camera while speaking if you have one. Because this meeting is not an in-person meeting, every vote will need to be a roll call vote. Staff will group items for votes to help save time. Please only speak when called upon. When called upon, please state your name and briefly make your point. I would ask that no one speak a second time on any one item until everyone who wishes to speak a first time has been able to do so. Presenters, if you're on the agenda to make a presentation, please do your best to be succinct. We hope that you will also turn on your camera during your presentation if you have one. For members of the public, we welcome comments from the public as part of each item at this meeting. We encourage you to use the raise hand feature as early into the item as you can to give this system time to acknowledge you. You should see the webinar panel located on the right-hand side of your screen. There you will find audio, questions, and handouts tab. Under the audio tab, attendees will have the choice to listen via the computer or telephone option. Should you prefer computer audio, please ensure the appropriate box is selected. If you choose the phone call option, select the corresponding box, dial the phone number, access code, and audio pin as directed by the automated system. Please note, if the audio pin is not entered, you will remain in listen-only mode and will be unable to speak to the Commission should you have a comment. As a reminder, each registered attendee is provided a unique link and phone number to access the webinar. These should not be shared with other participants as they are registered to a specific attendee. If more than one attendee uses the same link, it can be confusing if those folks are trying to make comments on the single item. There are two options for participants to provide comments on the agenda items. Click on the hand icon to indicate you wish to make a comment. You will then be unmuted and called upon to make your comment at the appropriate time. Please be sure to state your name and affiliation prior to voicing your remarks. Alternately, you may use the questions tab, type in the agenda item number you're commenting on, and your comment. Commission staff will read the comment on your behalf. Please do your best to be concise with your comments. Please make sure that your comments add new information. If you agree with the comment of a previous speaker, simply make that statement. Since we often have many speakers, we ask that you make your point in 3 minutes or less. If for some reason we have many speakers on a topic, we reserve the right to limit comments to 1 minute as needed. A timer may be displayed on screen during public comments. You will not be able to be on camera while making comments. Thank you for joining us today. We know your time is valuable and we appreciate you sharing some of it with us. And now we'll
Thank you very much, Douglas. And with that, would you please call the roll?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner Alvarado.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Davis,
Here.
Commissioner Eager,
Here.
Commissioner Falcone,
Here.
Hold on 1 second.
Commissioner Grisby,
Present.
Commissioner Guardino,
Present.
Commissioner Inman,
Present.
Commissioner Liu,
Here.
Commissioner Martinez,
Present.
thank you, Commissioner Tavaloni, Chair Norton,
Present.
Senator Newman, Assemblymember Friedman. Madam Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you very, very much. And with that, we're going to take items 2 and 3 together. Douglas?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Please note the correction from the agenda. I mislabeled the minutes. The agenda should read the minutes are for the August 18th, 19th, 2021 meeting. Item 2 is approval of the minutes. Item 3 is approval of meetings for compensation. Staff recommends your approval.
Commissioner Alvarado moves to approve.
Do we have a second?
Mr. Davis.
Okay, Alvarado Davis. Douglas, could you please read the roll?
Commissioner Alvarado,
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Davis,
Aye.
Commissioner Eager,
Aye.
Commissioner Falcone,
I'll abstain.
Commissioner Grisby,
Hold on just 1 second, please.
Commissioner Guardino,
Aye.
Commissioner Inman,
Aye.
Commissioner Liu,
Aye.
Commissioner Martinez.
Aye.
Commissioner Tavaloni. Chair Norton.
Aye.
Chair, the item is approved.
Thank you very much. And now we'll move to item 4, our report from the Commission Executive Director Mitch Weiss.
Good morning, Commissioners. First, I'd like to welcome our newest Commissioner, Clarissa Falcone, to her first Commission meeting. She was appointed to the Commission by the Senate Rules Committee on September 7th and brings a wealth of expertise in state government and public policy. We've been providing background briefings to familiarize her to the Commission, and we are ready to assist in any way we can to welcome you to the Commission. I'd also like to thank former Commissioner Kehoe for her service on the Commission. Commissioner Kehoe brought us her expertise in state government, having served at both the state and local levels, and was instrumental while on the Commission in helping to address the issues facing the inner city rail tracks along the Del Mar Bluffs. We'll miss you, Commissioner Kehoe, and wish you the best. Now I have some updates on our meeting format. When we met last in August, I noted that the executive order modifying state board and commission meeting requirements was about to expire. And that, of course, would affect our ability to meet in a virtual format. Since that time, the legislature passed and the governor signed into law AB 361, which essentially extends the provisions that were in the executive order for state bodies until January 31, 2022. We would still like to move to a hybrid in-person and virtual format for our upcoming meetings, depending on public health considerations. We're hoping to hold our December meeting as a hybrid meeting in Riverside, but we at least now know that we have the option to continue in all virtual format for December and January if needed. That said, we'll continue to monitor the public health guidance and we'll let everybody know about the format of our next meeting as soon as we can. Also, since we last met, we began holding our SB1 competitive program workshops. You'll be hearing a report about this later on our agenda from Matthew Yoscott, but I wanted to highlight a few important points now. First, this programming cycle is really about building on the success of our previous efforts. We've already done a lot through our guidelines in the past to encourage project submittals that will advance climate equity and economic growth outcomes within the statutory framework for each program. So we're not starting from scratch on these issues. We've laid some of the groundwork already. A good example is how we made zero-emission freight infrastructure eligible for the Trade Corridor Enhancement Program in our last cycle. Now, working with our partners and stakeholders, we'll try to build upon that to encourage agencies to submit more of these types of projects. Another example is on equity. We've had an enhanced focus on equity, issuing a racial equity statement, convening an equity advisory roundtable, and working towards a standing equity advisory committee. To translate that work into our guidelines, we're planning to have one of our upcoming program workshops focus specifically on equity, and our program staff will present at our next Equity Advisory Roundtable. A second point I want to cover is how our guidelines process works, since I know that there are always new stakeholder and partner representatives. New people sitting around our virtual table bring much needed fresh perspectives, but may not be familiar with our workshop process. The most important thing to keep in mind about our process is that it is public and open to everyone. We want everyone to come to the workshops, present their ideas, and discuss them in an open and transparent manner. If you have an idea or feedback for our guidelines, then please come to a workshop and discuss it. That way, we as staff can come up with recommendations for the guidelines where we know everyone's thoughts and views have been aired openly. That said, we certainly understand that everyone has busy schedules and the conflicts happen. So if you can't make a workshop, then please reach out to the program manager and provide your feedback on the topics that are going to be discussed. We're open to any and all ideas to make our workshops more accessible. We already announced them as far in advance as possible so that people can put them on their calendars. And in response to a suggestion we received, we are now recording them and posting them online. And finally, if something's not clear to you, please ask us to clarify. Sometimes what one person thinks they hear is not necessarily what another person thinks they said. So please ask staff to clarify what they mean, and I've asked our staff to do the same. Commissioners, we have a couple of updates later on the agenda related specifically to our equity work. First, we'll be hearing a report from Equity Advisory Roundtable members Stephanie Ramirez and Leslie Sanders on our last roundtable meeting, which was held on September 16th. I wanted to take a moment to note that ex officio Commissioner Josh Newman attended that. We know that transportation equity is a priority for the legislature too, and his role as ex officio commissioner is critical and important to highlight the link between the different branches of government. Then later on the agenda, we'll also have two informational items on topics that were discussed at the last roundtable meeting. An update on the status of the community listening sessions and considerations for the formation of a standing equity advisory committee. As you will hear, we're making a lot of progress, so I wanted to take a moment and recognize that this has been a joint effort of our staff, Caltrans staff, CalSTA staff, roundtable members, commissioners, and the public. Thank you all for your help. Also on the agenda, we have our regular reports on budget and legislation. Unfortunately, as I think most of you are aware, the $500 million general fund augmentation for the active transportation program and the $2.5 billion augmentation for the transit and intercity rail capital program did not come through in the end. Regarding policy bills, the governor signed SB 339 by Senator Wiener, which implements the commission's recommendation to conduct a road charge pilot program to test revenue collection. This is one of our big legislative priorities this year, so we're thankful to Senator Wiener for carrying this bill, to the legislature as a whole for passing it, to the many stakeholders who supported it, and to the governor for signing it into law. This is going to add momentum to the ongoing work towards a road charge since it's been over 4 years since California completed the last pilot. And we know we need to accelerate our efforts given the ambitious goals for zero emission vehicle adoptions. Our staff is already at work developing an implementation plan for the Commission's Road Charge Technical Advisory Committee, which is required to be developed for the pilot, which is required to be developed and by CalSTA in consultation with the Commission. To be frank, road charge is an area in which in recent years we've struggled in our coordination and cooperation with CalSTA and Caltrans. I've expressed my concerns about this to both Caltrans and CalSTA. I have been assured by CalSTA Undersecretary Alyssa Canove and Caltrans CFO Stephen Keck that we will move forward in a truly collaborative manner. I'd like to take a moment to tell Secretary Kim and Director Omar Shaka how much I appreciate this commitment to cooperation. I also want to highlight a couple of projects. We have some allocations on our agenda that are important, and these allocations, these actions that you take, they're actions that directly result in transportation projects being built and benefiting the public. Altogether for this meeting, we're recommending $3.1 billion in project allocations that will create nearly 35,000 jobs. Those are obviously impressive numbers that demonstrate the tremendous impact the Commission's work has in bettering the lives of Californians. But I also want to highlight a few specific projects to help illustrate the importance of our work. As one example, under tab 104, staff will be recommending you allocate nearly $2 million to San Francisco County, to San Francisco County for the construction of the Alamany Interchange Improvements Phase 2 project, funded through the Active Transportation Program. This project was first requested by a community organization looking to better connect several San Francisco neighborhoods that were divided by vehicle-dominated streets, highway ramps, and overpasses. These communities are designated as regional equity priority communities by the Metropolitan Transportation Commission and are predominantly communities of color, including Portola, Bayview, and Silver Terrace. As you can see from this slide, there are no sidewalks and bikes have to share the road with cars. I hope we have a slide. There we go.
Yep.
The second slide shows how car-centric area is. As you can see in this last slide, the project will construct a Class 1 multi-use path across Alamany Boulevard, creating a safer connection for bicyclists and pedestrians. Other improvements include 2 crosswalks, 4 ADA-compliant curb ramps, intersection light timing improvements, and 12 new shade trees. Once built, this project will connect residents to the Alamany Farmers Market, which offers fresh local produce, to 2 recreation centers that have programs for toddlers, youth, seniors, to the Bernal Heights Neighborhood Center, which provides linguistic and cultural services to vulnerable individuals and their families, and to employment agencies, the Bernal Heights Library, places of worship, restaurants, and a grocery store. A second project I want to highlight is under tab 99. Staff is recommending you allocate $20 million for the Folsom Light Rail expansion, which is part of the US 50 Multimodal Corridor Enhancement Project funded through the Solutions for Congested Corridors program. This project will enhance light rail capacity by constructing approximately 9,000 feet of track sidings to allow trains to pass in the section of single tracks on the Gold Line between the Sunrise and historic Folsom Station. This will permit trains to operate with 15-minute frequencies between those stations, where they currently operate with 30-minute frequencies. The more frequent service will increase ridership by making it more attractive and a practical option for residents to opt out of congestion. Commissioners, last week, the commission registered for the Clean Air Pledge. Clean Air Day was held on Wednesday, October 6th. I'd like to recognize Commissioner Liu and his team at the Coalition for Clean Air for doing a fantastic job with this event, which draws attention to the ways we can all contribute to cleaner air through simple activities like riding a bike or planting a tree. Nearly all commission staff participated. The most popular pledge was, hopefully not surprisingly, to reduce vehicle emissions by walking, biking, or telecommuting. But we also had many, many pledges just beyond just transportation. For instance, we had several pledges of staff planting a tree or another plant. We have a picture of Sherry Zamora planting a tree in her yard, which when it matures will sequester about 20 pounds of CO2 per year. We also have a picture of Hannah Walter with her new indoor plant. I want to thank our staff who participated and encourage everyone to continue with the activities they pledged and consider doing others in the future. I'd like to finish my report with some updates on upcoming events as well as staffing changes. We have a lot of events coming up, so saying I'm finishing my report at the moment might be a bit of an exaggeration. For the SB1 competitive programs, we'll have the next 3 workshops in October and then 3 more in November, with each workshop focusing on one of the programs. For the active transportation program, we'll have our first workshop on November 9th, followed by one on November 17th and one on December 1st. There's also an active transportation symposium on October 26th through 28th that's being hosted in partnership with the Active Transportation Resource Center, and which is emceed on different days by Chair Norton, Commissioner Gardino, and Caltrans Deputy Director Jeannie Ward-Waller. We have our next Equity Advisory Roundtable meeting coming up on October 28th, and our next Road Charge Technical Advisory meeting the day after that on October 29th. Then the following week, we have our next joint meeting with CARB and HCD on November 4th. We'll also have 2 hearings on the draft ITIP, the North hearing on November 1st and the South hearing on November 8th. And finally, We'll have the commission meeting on December 8th and 9th. Regarding staffing, I have a few announcements. Monica Torres has joined us from the California Air Resources Board, where she worked in the administrative services area. Monica has over 20 years of state experience, including with bond management, budgeting, accounting, and business services. She'll be working as an analyst with a traditional programming team. Next, Ozzie Sheard has joined the Legislation and Finance team as an analyst. Prior to joining the commission, Ozzie was an executive fellow at GoBiz, where he helped the zero emissions vehicle market development team. Also, Zach Taylor has transferred to the Legislation and Finance team. Zach joined the commission at the beginning of March 2020 and has been working since that time with the Local Streets and Roads program. This past spring, he served on a temporary 3-month assignment with the Legislation and Finance team and is now moving over there permanently. Finally, Kieran Parmar will finish her year-long assignment with the commission this Friday. Kieran has been an invaluable member of our planning and equity team, supporting the development of the commission's Equity Advisory Roundtable, Racial Equity Statement, and other high-profile assignments. Kieran has been on rotation from Caltrans and is returning to her permanent position in the Office of Freight Planning. I want to thank Director Omar Shakin for allowing Kieran to join the commission staff for the past year. We look forward to continuing to collaborate with her. Commissioners, that concludes my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Commissioners, are there any of you who wish to speak on Executive Director Weiss's report? Okay, and I see that we have no public comments. Thank you very much, Mitch, for such a thorough report. Truly appreciated. With that, we'll go to item 5, which is my report and the report of other commissioners. First, I want to also welcome Commissioner Clarissa Falcon and say how glad we are to have you here on the commission today. I really want to make sure that we highlight not only Commissioner Kehoe's leadership as a senator and as a CTC commissioner, as a leader in EV transportation, but also in LGBTQ issues. She was really a mentor and someone who I think is going to continue to play a strong leadership role throughout the state. And so we thank you for a great new set of services that are going to be part of Commissioner Falcon's vision. And we're looking forward to having you say a few words in this set of reports, Commissioner Falcon. But we want you to know you have some big shoes from a wonderful woman in Senator Kehoe. So with that, Commissioner Falcon, do you want to say a few words, and then I'll go back to the rest of my report?
Well, thank you so much, Chair Norton. I really appreciate the few minutes. Well, I promise to make it really short, but I do want to underscore everything you're saying about Senator Kehoe. She has been a personal hero and mentor for me, a trailblazer, not just regionally in San Diego, but in the legislature and throughout the state with LGBTQ, absolutely. And as a woman legislator and just overall a very solid and policy smart individual. I have absolutely huge shoes, heels to fill, and I'm honored that she's kept an open line with me if I ever need any advice to ask of her. And so I really am heartened by the acknowledgement, and it's too bad that we can't be here in person to celebrate her, but thank you for the words, and thank you so much all for the welcome. I'm truly honored by it. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. I wanted to also highlight that this has been quite a couple of months, not only with Clean Air Action Day on October 6th, which was fantastic, but also Mobility 21's conference, which brought together virtually over 1,000 transportation leaders. Commissioner Inman, Commissioner Liu, and I were part of panels, and it was really a good opportunity not only to hear from elected leaders and transportation leaders, but also to hear from Secretary Kim and Director Tokes Omashakin and many, many more who are moving transportation agendas very thoroughly. And it's an exciting time to be in this arena, and we thank you all for being part of it. I want to also thank Council Secretary Kim and Director Omashakin for two very important meetings that we had last week. It was great to continue to compare notes face to face. We have so much on our agenda, and we are all eagerly awaiting the federal vote on the infrastructure bill. And I'm pleased to say that within that infrastructure bill are many, many items that were part of our joint conversations with federal legislatures about some of the needs that we have in California that really need to be partnered on a federal level and require some of their support for us to do things like enhancing the Trade Corridor Enhancement Program, not only with zero emissions infrastructure that Mitch talked about that we can fund right now, but to look at enhancing the TSEP program so that we can have electric and hydrogen charging and fueling along highways. There are so many things in this bill that I think are going to be groundbreaking, and it is a pleasure to have the state of California be a model for the federal government to look at as to how to do so many, many things right. I am delighted that we are going to hear from Stephanie Ramirez, a friend and who's been a huge leader, especially locally in Los Angeles on Measure M and her work with AARP. But to really be part of these equity roundtables has been a privilege to hear what's happening in many, many communities, to hear more from our roundtable members as to how we should be considering our future policy making. And I want to make sure that we talk about today how important it is that we are moving forward on CAPDI together. We were pleased to be a meaningful part of the CAPDI development process, bringing together public input from a variety of sources with the economy, business community, elected officials, agencies, and advocates. That has been a huge partnership, and I think people are looking to us to see how this is going to be rolled out as part of our guidelines process. So we want to look forward to have you all be part of these guidelines meetings, to have these workshops be accessible. I appreciate that Mitch was talking about the desire to have people ask questions. We're lucky that in this opportunity to have more of our meetings online, that we've increased the accessibility of the general public being able to be part of these meetings. And with that has come some great work on behalf of our staff to really do some additional communications to make sure that everybody who comes to these meetings is able to understand and participate and lead as part of the public. Commissioners, as you and our partners and stakeholders are all aware, CTC has been taking this leadership role to make our transportation system cleaner, healthier, and more equitable through our program guidelines and project selection for some time now. And in recent program cycles, not only have we worked on the zero emissions infrastructure for Trade Corridor Enhancement Program, but we've strengthened the efficient land use connections for the Solutions for Congested Corridors program, and enacted many, many other policies to encourage project submittals that will protect our state's climate and health. We are truly appreciative of working with the governor's office, Secretary Kim, Director Omashakin, and the legislature to propose some items in the previous budget discussions that would have helped move us forward on many of the items that CAPDI discusses, such as active transportation programs, bike corridors, and others. We've been doing all of this so far within the statutory framework for our programs, which have specific restrictions and funding levels, as well as within the constitutional restrictions on the use of gas tax funds. So while we're already underway looking to improve climate, health, and equity in our guidelines and programs in this cycle and working towards policies laid out in the CAPDI, there will be same limitations on some funding. We therefore need in our programs significant increased funding that is specifically dedicated for cleaner transportation options like active transportation and transit. We received so much positive feedback when additional money was included for ATP in the request in the general fund. We were so excited to hear from people who were saying that if we could fund more of the ATP program, that would help, because during COVID-19, being able to have the staff time to apply and reapply and to work with CTC staff to make sure that there was all of this capacity building. And I just commend again the CTC staff for the significant work with the ATP process to make sure that we had people who were able to file on time, even with the additional deadline extensions. And again, that our staff met the other deadlines, even with everyone else getting extensions, so that we could put money out on the street. But we know that more money is needed. We need flexible funds like the State General Fund that have increased ability to focus more on projects that reduce greenhouse gas emissions, improve air quality and public health, stimulate the economy, and provide safe and equitable mobility options, the need for which has been greatly exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. We also need increased funds for the ATP and transit so agencies can leverage funding from the pending federal infrastructure bill. This is a once in a generation opportunity, and we certainly don't want to leave money on the table for California. And so with that, I'd like to recognize Vice Chair Bob Alvarado, who would like to discuss a proposal that we will hear here and then in item 14 as well. Vice Chair Alvarado.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kind of following up on last year's request, I would ask that the chair direct staff to pursue 2 one-time augmentations from the expected general fund surplus for next year. This will build on our work to fund projects advancing climate and health objectives, leverage anticipated federal funds, and address project backlogs and lack of funding capacity while we continue to work towards identifying ongoing funding solutions. I'm better prepared this time. Last time I just kind of threw it out there. I'd like to ask again, $2 billion for ATP, the same request as last spring. $1.5 billion for a current backlog of projects whose applications have already been reviewed and are ready to be funded. They're shovel-ready projects. $500 million for bike highways and low-stress bike networks. These are 2 new transformative pilot projects. $2.5 billion for STIP transit. This request is in addition to the $2.5 billion the governor proposed and is a new request. In addition to the $2.5 billion the governor's proposed for the transit Olympic projects and the TIRCP, and could complement that funding. Would help address issues with lack of funding for STIP transit projects from the public transportation account, and would go for new projects and possibly accelerate some existing ones. Funds will be spread around the state, hopefully through STIP regional shares. Kind of building on the federal bill and the general fund that we started on last spring. Hopefully we'll be a little bit better, a little bit more successful with this request. But if Chair wouldn't mind to have staff work on that, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, if you're looking for a second to Vice Chair Alvarado's eloquent motion, I would be happy to offer that. And I want to thank Vice Chair Alvarado for his persistence and his tenacity in moving this forward once again.
Thank you very much. Mitch, I'd like to ask, can we have a motion in a second. Can we vote on it within the commissioner reports, or should we put this in the 14, the budget and allocation capacity, since our commissioner report is an action item?
So you could do this under the commissioner report. However, it might fit in better under 15, the state and federal legislative matters, because
Okay.
That's all I'm going to say, I guess.
Great. So let's.
A lot of nodding heads.
So we have a motion and a second. Can we hold this on the desk until item 15?
Yes.
Okay, great. With that, I want to thank you, because I think this partnership, and again, we have been such extraordinary partners with the public in asking for this additional opportunity with money that can be used to expand on the CAPDI goals. We are really looking forward to working with Director Omishakin and CalSTA Secretary David Kim on continued work with the legislature to guide the budget process and to make sure that we have the kinds of funds needed, that when the federal infrastructure bill is signed, that we have money that can be leveraged to help us gain more of the funds that are competitive nationally. With that, I'd like to conclude my report and ask if there are any other commissioners who would like to speak on this item today and the commissioner reports.
Chair Norton, I would like to also add my praises and thanks to Commissioner Kehoe. She's been a very important part of this commission, and I just want to express my personal congratulations and wish you the best in the future.
Thank you. Any other commissioners who wish to speak on this item? Commissioner Inman. Thank you, Commissioner Alvarado.
Thanks. I'll do a +1 to Commissioner Alvarado. And in full disclosure, let Secretary Kim know that I pledged to Senator Kehoe that I would be a loyal voice to lean in on finding bluff solutions on our corridor down there. So I'll join Clarissa in that regard. But yeah, hats off to Senator Kehoe. And there's a wonderful hiking trail right by the Del Mar racetrack there. If you haven't done it, I'd encourage everybody, if you're in the area, to put on your walking shoes and enjoy it. But I wanted to lean in today really in regard to our ongoing challenges around hiccups in the supply chain. Commissioner Liu and I brought this up in March, and frankly, I think we've become more stuck, if that's good grammar, since then. But it's going to take all of us. I know the Biden administration is going to announce today, they may have already given the timing, time change, but opening up, making sure our ports are fully open 24/7. However, as I remind everybody, we're part of a greater system of systems, so that we may not see as much relief from that as we would like to, as we have hiccups all along the supply chain. So we had a great panel at Mobility 21. Hopefully we can share that with everybody. But it really is going to take a village of all of our supply chain partners, figuring out what we can do differently. We know that we have an economic and an environmental crisis by this hiccup, and that was evidenced by an oil spill that occurred. And, you know, who knows where that will, the final research will be investigation, but it's not good, whatever caused it. And so I participated in the CalSTA and GoBiz supply chain success efforts. Really want to tip my hat to the partnership with Tom O'Brien and the great work that he does at Cal State Long Beach and Metrans in helping us find solution. We got some ideas out of that and focus, and really bringing supply chain partners together. Also, our team at CTC has been working on a proposal with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, in particular their research department and the access that they have to their modeling and the supercomputers, really looking at resiliency and building on that. If we look at the comments we received on our ITIP proposal, I think resiliency is always front and center. So for all of us, it's going to take everything we can think of, I think, to figure this out. We all did, or a number of us did, the Clean Air Pledge last week, and there were small steps and big steps. And I would encourage folks to do the same on the supply chain. So to the extent, if you're ordering online, you can hit that little tab that says, you don't have to send me everything today, wait till the end of the week and gather all my orders and send them together. That may help. But clearly our state is at ground zero in terms of huge movements of goods, and all of the forecasts look like these numbers are going to continue. So it's either the first mile, the big mile across the sea, the middle miles, and the last mile. We have hiccups in every single one. So whatever we can do to open up those lines and keep pushing so that we can get our lines flowing again. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And Commissioner Inman, I forgot that you and I were able to speak on the panel for the CTA. and that the California Trucking Association has been really leaning in on how to work towards zero emission, as we had the presentation from Chris Shimoda last time. It's a very good discussion on not only getting the supply chain moving, but greening the supply chain. And I want to thank you for your statewide and frankly national leadership, Commissioner Inman, on that issue. Thank you very much. With that, are there any other commissioner reports? Commissioner Lude, do you want to give a summary of your Clean Air Action Day before we start the rest of the meeting?
Thank you. Thank you for that opportunity. I guess I would be happy to take you up on that. And you know, I guess a second add-on to the appreciation for Senator Kehoe's membership and being a colleague with her at CTC here was a real honor. Fantastic person, wonderful career, and I wish her well. Commissioner Inman, I joined Commissioner Inman at that Success event at the Port of Long Beach. I'm glad she's optimistic. I'm not so optimistic with our challenges in the supply chain right now. It's a complete mess. So I think we should just blame Mitch, because we told him to fix this, and it hasn't happened. So we have to put the blame anywhere, but we know exactly where to do that. So yes, we hosted our fourth California Clean Air Day event last Wednesday. Mitch and I happened to be at the Asilomar conference that was being hosted by the UC Davis Institute for Transportation Studies, and we got a lot out of that. I drove an electric vehicle there, so I had no vehicle emissions that day whatsoever, and mostly walked around the beautiful surroundings of Asilomar in Monterey. We had a record day. We had 1.8 million, I think if I get these statistics right, 1.8 million people participating and something like 8 million impressions. And I noticed that Mitch, provided information on how many of our CTC staff participated. I'd like to thank all of them for doing it. I'd also like to acknowledge that the greatest number of participants came out of Caltrans. So it was, they did outreach, and the most people we had far and away was from Caltrans. So it's really great to have the support. It's an effort to just really get everybody to do at least one thing for clean air on one day of the year, and remind everybody how important it is that clean air is a right. It's a public health issue. It's also something that we can take control of if we make commitments to do so. So thank you, Chair Norton, for that opportunity, and thank you everyone who participated in Clean Air Day.
Wonderful. Thank you, Commissioner Liu, for your leadership in cleaning the air in all the ways possible. Commissioners, are there any others of you who wish to speak on this item? Hearing none, and we have no public comment on this item, I will move on to hearing from CalSTA Secretary David Kim. Good morning.
Thank you, Chair Norton, and good morning, everyone. It is great to be with all of you. As others have done, I'd like to start by welcoming and congratulating the newest member of the Commission, Clarissa Reyes Falcone. Commissioner Falcone, I have read all about your background, and I am especially impressed with your many years advocating on the front lines for bike and pedestrian infrastructure as well as transit. I think you're going to bring a really important perspective to the Commission, and I'm looking forward to working with and getting to know you. So congratulations and welcome. And as others have also done, I also want to say thank you to Commissioner Senator Chris Kehoe for her many years of truly exceptional service on the Commission. She was one of the driving forces. Actually, I should amend that. She was the driving force in our effort to address short-term and long-term solutions on the Del Mar Bluffs. And it was a tremendous experience to work closely with her, not only on Del Mar Bluffs, but other important regional issues like Otay Mesa East Port of Entry and State Route 11, just to name a few. We're going to miss her so much, but I think we can all agree that she made so many important and lasting contributions during her tenure on the Commission in terms of shaping transportation policy and programming decisions in California. And I am personally so grateful for her many years of service in the legislature and on this commission. Let me start with an update on port congestion and supply chain disruptions. I think Commissioner Inman touched on this. This has been and continues to be top of mind for many of us, including at the very highest levels of government, like the White House. President Biden is meeting right now at this very minute with retailers, port leaders, and labor unions to talk about solutions and what every player in the supply chain can do to address these congestion issues. So for example, the Port of LA is announcing today it will move to 24/7 operations. And in doing so, LA will join Port of Long Beach, which expanded to 24/7 about 3 weeks ago. On the labor side, ILWU is also making a commitment today to have its members work 24/7 extra shifts in order to take advantage of 24/7 port operations. And very importantly, large companies like Walmart, UPS, FedEx, Samsung, Home Depot, and Target are also making major commitments today to go to 24/7 and move more containers during off-peak hours, which means nighttime. And I think all of these commitments taken together, from ports to labor to retailers, will play a big role in increasing throughput and gradually easing the backlog. And I think there will likely be a ripple effect in terms of getting other retailers and supply chain actors to do the same thing. And as I've mentioned before, the entire supply chain system is driven largely by the private sector. And what the federal government has been doing, and what we've also been doing in concert with the White House and DOT, is use our convening authority, some might call it moral authority, to bring together all of the players and try to get people to step up. And so along those lines, just a few weeks ago, CalSTA co-hosted the California Supply Chain Success Summit, and we did it in partnership with GoBiz, Port of Long Beach, and Cal State Long Beach's Center for Transportation and International Trade. It was a very candid dialogue with port officials and a wide variety of supply chain leaders, and the group talked about both short-term and long-term steps we can take together. And I want to thank Commissioner Inman, Commissioner Liu, and Tony Tavares, Director of Caltrans District 7, for being a part of the summit. We also had significant representation from the Biden-Harris administration, including Port Envoy John Porcari, along with Federal Maritime Commissioner Dan Maffei, and Acting MARAD Administrator Lucinda Leslie. Now, in terms of next steps, Cal State Long Beach is pulling together a final report that will summarize where we go from here. And in the meantime, we've also been rolling up our sleeves to come up with solutions where we can. So for example, I've been working directly with Mr. Porcari, whom I know very well from my time at DOT, on a number of local issues in and around the San Pedro Bay ports. This is clearly a work in progress, and there's definitely so much more to do. And as I've said before, what's in front of us is highly complicated, and it's a global phenomenon. But I do think today's White House announcement, along with the engagements we've led in recent weeks, is shining a very big spotlight on the issue and also conveying a sense of urgency that all of us, especially and including the private sector, must step up and do our part to reduce bottlenecks and greatly improve the flow of goods that everyone depends on. So much more to come. Stay tuned. Let me now turn to the Transit and Intercity Rail Capital Program, TIRCP. Just a couple weeks ago, CalSTA put out draft guidelines for the upcoming award cycle, and that's going to take place in 2022. Those draft guidelines are now available for public review as well as legislative review, and interested parties will have more than the 30 days required by statute. And we also have workshops lined up for November 2nd and 3rd, with public comments due by November 10th. We will then release final program guidelines and then formally issue a call for projects in the latter part of November. So you're probably wondering how much will be available in the next round, and the answer is 500 to 600 million of new funding for projects statewide through fiscal year 2026-27. That amount, of course, is subject to adjustment based on future fund balance analysis. I also think Mitch may have previously alluded to this, but I do want to point out that the available amount of funding would have been much higher had the legislature approved the governor's transportation package in his California Comeback Plan. But the governor looks forward to re-engaging with the legislature next year to finalize and pass a comprehensive transportation package that invests in a wide variety of critically necessary projects, including high-speed rail, connectivity projects in advance of the LA Olympics, active transportation, road and bridge repair, and many other rail system improvements. It's worth pointing out that much of the funding proposed for the transportation package would be distributed through TIRCP. Madam Chair, as you'll hear more about later today, Caltrans just released the 2021 Interregional Transportation Strategic Plan, or ITSP. ITSP is an overall framework that looks at interregional travel policy, and it's fully aligned with CAPDI as well as California Transportation Plan 2050. ITSP also sets the stage for the Interregional Transportation Improvement Program, ITIP, which will be released in the coming days. It's worth mentioning that this year's ITSP focuses heavily on reducing GHGs and preparing our infrastructure to be more resilient to the impacts of climate change. It also strongly emphasizes a multimodal planning approach that prioritizes sustainable transportation solutions. And you're going to see this in the new ITIP scoring criteria as defined in the ITSP. Also want to point out that the ITSP maintains investments that were made in previous plans. So more to come, but I think the commission will find it informative as you prepare to consider the proposed ITIP. Also want to say a brief word about the Strategic Highway Safety Plan for 2020 through 2024, which is a collaborative effort involving many stakeholders and agencies at all levels of government. That plan just earned a National Roadway Safety Award from the Federal Highway Administration and the Roadway Safety Foundation. And a lot of credit goes to our federal, state, local, tribal, and community-based partners for their leadership on what we call the SHSP pivot. And the best way to describe that is a concerted effort to embrace a much more urgent, relentless approach to roadway safety and putting in place bolder and more innovative strategies that will save lives. Because if you look at recent data, the trend is troubling to say the least. Fatalities and serious injuries involving bicyclists, pedestrians, and vehicle occupants are going up. And I'm really glad to say that everyone involved with the SHSP is approaching roadway safety with a sense of urgency and being as innovative and creative as possible. And that's the reason for the recognition. But clearly, we have a very long way to go. And I don't think any of us can allow the status quo to continue. We've got to redouble our efforts to create safer conditions for everyone, especially vulnerable road users like bicyclists and pedestrians. Finally, Madam Chair, I wanted to mention that AASHTO will be holding its annual meeting in San Diego 2 weeks from now. It's their first in-person annual meeting since 2019, and we're so very lucky that they've chosen San Diego for their gathering. I think most of you are familiar, but just by way of background, AASHTO is the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials. They're a national association that represents highway and transportation agencies in all 50 states, plus DC and Puerto Rico. I've worked with AASHTO very closely throughout my career, and it's a great venue to share lessons learned and best practices, and also form relationships with transportation officials from around the country. Not surprisingly, AASHTO is a major policy player at the national level. They are plugged into everything that's happening on Capitol Hill with the infrastructure bill, reconciliation, and everything else. So we are thrilled that AASHTO will be in California for this important meeting, and we'll be ready to personally welcome a very large group of conference attendees from all over the country. And so with that, Madam Chair, thank you for the time, and I look forward to the meeting. And I have to end by saying, go Dodgers.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much, Secretary Kim, and thank you for your leadership nationally and statewide regarding all of these items. And we really are eager to find out when we can get some response on the federal infrastructure bill and to work with you and to make sure that California gets as much of the funding as possible. So thank you very much for your leadership always. With that, are there any commissioners who wish to speak on Secretary Kim's report? Okay. Do we have any public comments, Justin?
Chair Norton, I see no public comment at this time. Thank you.
I do see Commissioner Falcone. You have the floor, Commissioner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to thank Secretary Kim for the warm welcome and the comments, and appreciate the acknowledgement on the work that I've been working on with transit and pedestrian and other mobility choices. Also, you know, just when I was in the legislature and some of the work I used to do with the Regional Economic Development Corporation, worked a lot on border infrastructure. And I just want to express my gratitude for the state's focus on getting State Route 11 and Otay Mesa Port of Entry constructed. It's been a project that personally I've worked on for many years, so appreciate that focus with the state and working with the federal government and the federal government of Mexico. So appreciate that. Just really quick, I would be really interested, you know, knowing how important trade is to our economy. You know, also how we can incorporate, you know, clean air strategies. As you know, we see medium and heavy vehicles moving through the border, and so we'll be very interested in engaging in those conversations. So I just want to thank you again for the warm welcome, and really look forward to working with you, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Falcone. As you may know, the recently enacted state budget includes a significant amount of funding for zero-emission heavy-duty vehicles, both on the commercial truck side, as well as transit buses and school buses. And so while my agency, CalSTA, does not have a role in that, we work closely with the Energy Commission and CARB, who are the lead agencies in distributing those funds. And so I think this is a great opportunity to really ramp up deployment of zero-emission trucks, buses, school buses, and transit buses throughout the state. So definitely looking forward to working with you. And then on the CalSTA side, the state budget does include about $400 million for us to use for zero-emission rail cars, deployment of and purchase of those cars. And so I think across the board, regardless of vehicle type, we have a golden opportunity to really move ahead aggressively with zero-emission vehicles. So thanks for your comments.
Thank you. Well, Secretary Kim, with no further ado, I appreciate your report, and we thank you for your ongoing participation in these next 2 days. Thank you for your time. With that, we will move to Caltrans Director Tokes Omishakin. Director Omishakin.
Chair Norton, thank you for the opportunity again today to present to the commission. Can you hear me clearly? Hopefully you can. Okay, thank you. So Chair Norton, commissioners, Director Weiss, and members of the public, again, thank you for the opportunity to briefly share a little bit of what's been happening at Caltrans since we last met. But before I get to that, again, I want to share a warm welcome to Commissioner Falcone in her recent appointment to the commission. Welcome to the commission. I got a chance to meet Commissioner Falcone yesterday. I spent a little bit of time, or most of the day actually, yesterday in San Diego as we broke ground on a new part of the I-5 HOV lane project there. It was good to meet you in person and welcome. We at Caltrans look forward to working with you in the months and years to come. And also want to thank Commissioner Kehoe for her tenure and her leadership on the commission for many years. Her leadership on rail issues is one thing that I will always remember, how passionate she was about addressing issues related to Delmar Bluffs and multimodal transportation in general in the region. So Commissioner Kehoe, again, thank you for your leadership, and wish you the best as you move forward. Chair Norton, before I move forward with my remarks, also want to thank you, as you mentioned, for time to meet earlier this month. I appreciate you taking the time coming up rather from SoCal to come and spend some time with me and as we continue to share ideas on how we can move the vision for transportation forward in the state. So much appreciated, and look forward to more discussions and work along that front. Next slide. So as usual, want to start off our meeting here by recognizing one of our 22,000 employees at Caltrans and much of the good work that continues to happen within the department. And the person I'm recognizing today, excited to recognize, is a guy who has discovered a deeper purpose for his work within the department and who takes full fulfillment in his everyday work for Caltrans. He's a 21-and-a-half-year veteran of the department, started off as a maintenance worker and has been fortunate to move up to now being a lead highway maintenance worker in District 3 at our Auburn maintenance station. And that gentleman, that person is David Trejo. Being of service, he says, is what drives him. And you can tell this by the great number of letters and commendations that he regularly receives from the public. David's quote, and I'll read this, he says, "The fellowship that takes place when I get a chance to help someone in need is the best part of working for Caltrans. I was put in this role to help and make a difference, and I know that's what I signed up for." So quick story about David, something that recently happened. I mentioned the fact that he's received several commendations. He was traveling behind a motorist on I-80, headed eastbound on I-80, when he struck that motorist struck a 20-pound turkey midair. That turkey shattered the windshield of the motorist, the truck, and glass sprayed all over that person's car and into the person's vehicle. David was traveling a few vehicles behind the motorist. He was able to pull over with this individual. Person was distraught and frantic, with cuts all over their face and all over their body. David was able to guide this person to the nearest car wash facility to help remove the glass from the vehicle and their body. After he did that, after he guided that person to the car wash, he then went back and made sure he was able to get the turkey out of the roadway so nobody else could get injured or hurt. And he then went back to the motorist again and offered to help take that person to a rental car location in case the car was no longer motorable. So he got a note for this from our District 3 office, and the motorist said, "David is a very hard and conscientious worker. He's simply amazing." So I just want to commend and thank David. He said he gets excited about the opportunity to change people's minds and perceptions about state workers. So I want to thank David for his service as he's gone above and beyond regularly what he's called to do in service to Caltrans in the state. So congratulations, David, and thank you for all the work that you continue to do, the great work you do for the department. Thank you. Next slide. So I'm pleased to announce I've appointed Nabila Abi Rashid as acting chief engineer for the department. She's replacing Janice Benton, who acted in that role for 4 months. So Nabila is getting the chance as well to lead this tremendously important work and team for Caltrans. If you don't know Nabila, she's a graduate of Cal State University, Fresno. She has a degree in civil engineering. She's been with the department for several years, but she has 26 years of experience, both on the public and private side. And she brings a wealth of knowledge related to everything from project delivery to environment and construction. Many of you may know her from her work as the SB1 program manager for a year. So please, if you haven't had a chance to welcome Nabila to this important leadership role at Caltrans, please do when you get a chance. Next slide. So as been highlighted a little bit in the meeting already today, we will continue to emphasize and shine a light on the importance of the safety work that happens at Caltrans and across the state. So more specifically, some things that have occurred since we last met. We are putting in place a new director's policy on safety, and the focus of this new policy is to eliminate fatal and serious injuries with our goal as we focus on the bigger goal of Vision Zero by 2050, completely eliminating fatal and serious injuries. As you may know, we currently experience 10 people a day that die on our transportation system in the state, and the number for serious injuries is 50. 50 people every single day are seriously injured on our transportation system. I think Secretary Kim mentioned the fact that that we're in a very tough place as this goes right now. And there's so much more work for us to do, despite some of the recognition that we've been getting. But again, with this policy, we've separated health and safety, the health and safety of our internal workforce we've separated that from traffic safety within the department, pull those apart. We're working with the Caltrans executive board, the executive management of the department to put this policy in place. We also want to eliminate race, age, and mode-based disparities, as again has been mentioned already, is one of the challenges that we're facing, and achieve that Vision Zero goal through a safe systems approach by not just focusing on the behavioral challenges that we see on the transportation network, but challenges related to how we build and design the transportation system as well. That's going to get an enhanced focus through this policy. And again, we're expediting the policy review through the department, through the executive team of the department. Secretary Kim mentioned the fact that we received a national award from Federal Highways. Want to thank Federal Highways for that recognition. Also, a part of that award recognition was from the Roadway Safety Foundation. Again, they recognize 7 states, I believe, across the country with this award. But again, this is testament to how much hard work we've put into planning to get to that ultimate goal of zero by the year 2050. I want to thank our federal highway partners here in the state, Vince Mamano, CHP, Commissioner Ray and her team, and Barbara Rooney, our OTS director, for their support and their partnership along the way, and many other local and state partners as well for their efforts along these lines. Next slide. So regularly, some standing items that will be a part of the agenda will include items like safety, equity, climate action, but also routinely, I want to update the board, the commission rather, on issues related to maintenance and SB1, homelessness, Clean California, some of the things, major activities that are taking place within the department. Very, very regularly update the commission as well on those issues. So as far as a quick maintenance update, it goes without saying it's been a tough year for us, as we've had to focus more on items related to issues related to bridge repair and pavement repair, guardrails, the traditional things that we do, but also focus on issues related to emergency response, especially on the fire front. If you don't subscribe to the New York Times, if you get a chance, there was an article in the New York Times this Monday that highlighted the fire challenge, particularly in California. A couple of major things that I took away from reading that article. Over the 20th century, California averaged roughly 500,000 acres a year in acres burned a year, I should say. Lately, over the last 2 years specifically, that number has gone up to more than 2.5 million acres. So up from 500,000. So five times what we've averaged. The Dixie Fire alone has burned nearly 1 million acres in the state. So, and our involvement, our role in that as Caltrans has continued to see an increase. But our role is mainly to maintain the emergency evacuation routes and collaborate with state and federal and local partners to open our highways as soon as it's safe to do so. The current estimate, and this is a rough estimate of what that cost has been to the state and specifically to Caltrans, as it relates to the highway component is nearly $170 million just in this fire season. But we're fortunate that with the Federal Highway Reimbursement Program through the ER program, we will get 100% of emergency, 100% of that funding back on the things that we apply for. And with FEMA, that number is 75% for fire debris removal. So we will continue to work with our federal partners to see that the money that we're spending to address these emergency related issues can be reimbursed and come back to the state. But just quickly to just mention as well, just some of the other work that we're doing, 53 days this year, have our Caltrans team been a part of the State Operations Center, providing mutual aid and 10 mission tasks that we were a part of just in this recent fire season. So we've been very involved in all the wildfires that have taken place across the state this year. Next slide. And as a part of this, I think it goes without saying as well that even though climate change may not be creating the wildfires, it's no doubt intensifying the wildfires across the state. And recently, earlier this year, I should say, the governor's wildfire and forest action plan was released, and it calls on Caltrans to proactively create and maintain defensible space within and alongside Caltrans right-of-way to reduce wildfire ignitions and contain wildfires when they start. To achieve this, Caltrans has accomplished a variety of tasks, including partnering with external fire officials in the identification of the highest priority primary emergency evacuation routes across California that will benefit from vegetation thinning to create fire-safe roads. We are hiring 19 specialty contractors to remove excess fuels from more than 1,200 miles of priority emergency evacuation routes in all of our districts. And we're forming a vegetation and wildlife management executive steering committee of district directors to advise on the implementation of the governor's action plan and priorities in each of our districts. So again, we've been very involved in efforts related to wildfire and its connection to the climate challenges we continue to face. And obviously, there's much more work to be done here to reduce these impacts that we continue to face in the state. Next slide. So for a quick update on equity, heard Director Weiss on several points mentioned how much is taking place on the CTC front. We continue to do the same at Caltrans. This is one of our foundational principles that we focus on every single day, all of our work. It's done through an equity lens today. We have a 4 Ps framework that I've presented on before at the commission: people, programs, projects, partnerships, and planet. But some of our efforts to date, to provide a little bit of an update on, we recently engaged the Department of Fair Employment and Housing to continue to understand our ability to leverage federal and state civil rights laws impacting both housing and transportation. It's good to get leadership from that department involved with Caltrans to see how we can continue to partner together on both housing and transportation related issues, because we know both of those sectors are very much connected to one another. On the Clean California front, as a part of equity, we've held several dozen job hiring events across the state, and approximately 200 unhoused or formerly incarcerated applicants have been offered opportunities, conditional job opportunities to work for Caltrans. And so that's really an important part of addressing both Clean California and issues related to equity and housing. The Caltrans Office of Race and Equity, CORE, is working on hosting the equity listening sessions. Many of us are familiar with this already. It's jointly organized between the CTC and CalSTA, and you will hear a little bit more about this later in the agenda today. We also kicked off the development of the Equity Index tool with an internal task force. This Equity Index tool is going to help us within the department to make better decisions as it relates to how we move forward on transportation projects within the department. I am not aware of any other state DOT who has a tool similar to this. I'm looking forward to our office, the core office's efforts to put this tool in place to continue to guide us as a department. Also, important to note from the core office, they're working on creating the equity advisory, establishing the equity advisory committee between, again, CTC and CALSA staff. This was an action that was identified through CAPTI for us to put together. Two other offices working on equity issues within the department, our Office of Civil Rights. Through August 2021, they've helped guide more than 15% of our contracting within the department to the tune of roughly $374 million to DBEs. So 15% of our contracting. Also, small businesses have received nearly 39% of awards at roughly $750 million. And very important to note and highlight the fact that at Caltrans, we have updated our triennial DBE goal. Triennial DBE goal is now 22.2%. We've gone through the process of working with the federal government, with federal highways, to increase our DBE goal. It was formerly 17.6%. It's now 22.2%. So a bigger challenge awaits us to get more DBEs into contracting opportunities with Caltrans, and I look forward to our Civil Rights Office team being able to get that done. Our EEO office at Caltrans is also doing a lot of great work on heritage-related issues within the department. But one of the key things that I am excited that is continuing to gain a lot of movement within the department is the diverse interview panel pilot that launched in July and focuses on implicit bias training, but also includes a best practice component focused on equity and the employee experience during the hiring process. And it's in its final stages of training. So a lot happening on the equity front within the department in many different divisions, but also through an overall scope within our agency. Next slide. Homelessness, I mentioned, is something that also we at Caltrans have had to have a heavy involvement in. We continue to work closely and collaboratively with local and state partners on this challenge we face. But I want to thank and commend the leadership of the state, both the legislature, but very specifically Governor Newsom for his leadership and guidance as he's in his comeback plan, the California comeback plan. He has dedicated $12 billion to tackle the homelessness crisis. And Caltrans, we take our involvement, our role in tackling this challenge. We take that role very seriously. We continue to focus on mitigating safety risk at encampments on state property, clean trash and debris, and to coordinate with state and local agencies to connect people to living conditions that are better off than the encampments that they currently live in. The comeback plan, if you're not familiar with it, offers flexible aid to local governments and encampment resolution grants to assist local governments with resolving encampment-related challenges. We've had some successes, I would say many successes actually, from Caltrans in assisting on the homeless and housing crisis. Recently, in the city of Berkeley and Alameda County, we helped find various housing opportunities for people living on I-80 near University Avenue. More than 60 people who previously lived on I-80 on University Avenue, we were able to help relocate and clean that entire area near I-80. Also in Sacramento, very recently, a 100-bed emergency homeless shelter was opened up through the work by our District 3 team, and working with the city leadership, the mayor and the city manager here in Sacramento. But also, we've had some media coverage last week that I think I definitely need to mention, and the fact that we've had some recent challenges with encampments specifically in Sacramento. We released a joint statement last week with the city, and we've decided to pause on all encampment removals in Sacramento to give the city and the county more time to find resources for those experiencing homelessness. We'll continue to look forward to working collaboratively with the city to arrive at solutions that are beneficial to all experiencing homelessness in the city of Sacramento. Next slide, and one more slide after this, and I look forward to questions. Just quickly on our projects update, the graphic that you see there on your left shows how many projects are in a capital program for this FY 2021-2022 project cycle. All those projects combined, there are 331 projects at the value of 4.3 billion, and a total cost of 1.3 billion for the preliminary engineering component of this as well. So a lot of work that we're expected to move forward on in this FY cycle. And the graphic on the right, if you click again, the graphic on the right shows just how far we are in this fiscal year. We're only, when this snapshot was taken, it was only 2 months into the FY, and so we're at 11% of all the capital projects being moved forward at roughly $500 million. And the scheduled projects were at 9%, or 24 projects out of the 331 projects. So a lot of work taking place. You can see the numbers. There are 70 safety projects, 1,500 miles roughly of lane miles of pavements to repair, 125 bridges, 524 culverts. A lot of work ahead in the shop and many other areas. And final slide here, next slide. I will try to highlight bridge projects, I will try to highlight a project every meeting and just share a little bit about a particular project that is supporting the overall goals of the CTC and CalSTA and Caltrans in these meetings. We're moving forward with the Bridge Deck program that now has, well, this cycle, it has 15 bridge projects in there at a roughly 1.5 million square feet of bridge deck that we will be replacing across the state. Nearly 50% of those are in the Bay Area. And this project, program, will help us achieve several of the targets from the CTC and Federal Highways performance targets. We have more than 1.5% of the bridge decks classified as poor by 2027. The current number is 3.5. So the goal is to get to 1.5 by 2027, and that the current number of bridges classified as poor is 3.5%. So we have a lot of work to do over the next 5 years, 5 or 6 years to get there. And I believe we're off to a great start with these 15 projects that we'll be doing. And we'll be tackling 80 bridges over the next 2 years through this program. So that's a quick project highlight. Madam Chair, Chair Norton, thank you again for the opportunity to present a little bit of what's been happening at Caltrans over the last couple of months since we last met. Look forward to hearing any questions that you may have from me. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much for your very thorough presentation. And we do have a question from Commissioner Eager.
Good morning, Director Omashakin. Nice to see you this morning. I actually just wanted to say a special thank you to you and your District 6 staff. We did a State Route 99 in Madera opening of that expansion. The number of people that have been injured and died in that area was astonishing. And we heard about that on that day of that opening. So the fact that that was completed is a long time coming, but people that showed up that day really gave accolades to you and your staff for ensuring that we did get that completed. So I did want to say a special thank you to you and Diana Gomez and her staff for getting that completed. I also wanted to say a special thank you. I know Secretary Kim, hopefully you're still on there. Thank you for attending that event. He came and really highlighted the work that you all do. So I want to say a special thank you to him too. And also to him specifically, I have to say, go Giants.
Okay.
Just want to say quickly, thank you, Commissioner Eager, for again your leadership through this commission, and in particular the Valley. Heard a lot of great things about the opening, that they know how important that corridor is on the safety front, the safety challenges we've had, and of course ag related and freight related movement through 99. So excited about the place we are today on 99, and thanks to Secretary Kim for representing the CalSTA team down there at the event as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. I see from Justin that there are no public comments. So if there are no other comments from commissioners, I want to thank you, Director Omashakin, for your great presentation, very thorough, and thank you for continuing to show different ways that you are taking the highway program, the bridge program, and making it multimodal and fulfilling a lot of the vision that you have talked about. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair Norton.
You and your staff. With that, we do not have Vincent Mamano here today, so we are going to go to item 9, Regional Agencies Moderator, Dawn Vitezzi.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, and I hope I didn't butcher your last name. Sorry about
that. I'll answer to anything that's close. Thank you. Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. First, the RTPA group would like to extend our congratulations and welcome to Commissioner Falcone, and our best wishes to Commissioner Kehoe as she departs the Commission. I also want to congratulate Caltrans on the 2021 National Roadway Safety Award in recognition of the 2020-2024 Strategic Highway Safety Plan. And I want to also acknowledge our RTPA group representatives to the SHSP leadership and steering committees. Previously, the Stanislaus Council of Governments represented the RTPA and MPO group, and our current representatives are from the Fresno Council of Governments. And so I'd like to acknowledge their participation and appreciation to them for keeping the RTPA group informed about these critically important safety initiatives and strategies. The RTPA group held its regular meeting yesterday afternoon, and CTC staff presented updates on ITIP hearings, SB1 workshops, the ATP program, and the road user charge program. And we'd like to thank staff for the robust schedule of workshops for the SB1 cycle that will incorporate the CAPTI goals and equity integration, and really for recording and posting the workshops for stakeholders who can't necessarily attend the workshops as they're happening. So that's greatly appreciated. We are looking forward to another ATP symposium, and also appreciate the opportunity for regional and local entities to schedule virtual site visits with CTC staff for the upcoming ATP cycle. We also are pleased to have updates on the final Interregional Transportation Strategic Plan and ITIP development from Caltrans, and we're looking forward to participating in the upcoming ITIP hearings. We also appreciate the update on the California Freight Advisory Committee activities that we received from Kelly Egan. And then Angel Pyle provided updates on SB1 reporting and on the 2022 SB1 cycle development schedule for Caltrans. I'd like to say that in general, RTPAs did express some concern about the proposed schedule, and with several requesting that Caltrans consider adding a little more time for initial submittal of projects just so as not to get too far ahead of the guideline development process. And we really appreciate Angel's willingness to consider the input. So thank you, Angel. Local assistants provided regular updates on the use of regional obligation authority and the share of August redistribution received and used by the local agencies. And the collaboration and active engagement throughout the entire federal fiscal year led to the full use of the local share of OA and redistribution. So it's a fantastic job by everyone. We had a recap or a debrief of our first local assistance training day that was conducted on September 8th. We had approximately 600 attendees participating in the training, which is really incredible. And we're working with local assistants on setting a schedule and agenda for the next set of topics to be held early next calendar year. We also heard that there were about 800 attendees at the Clean California Grant Program workshops, and that just is, indicative of the strong interest and need throughout the state for the program. We got updates on the local agency certification program, as well as the project monitoring tools under development and local assistance, and we look forward to continued development of tools that help local agencies successfully deliver their projects and monitor the critical project deadlines. Finally, FHWA provided an update on the FAST Act extension, informed us that we weren't first place this year in redistribution, and provided an update on statutes related to distribution of surface transportation block grant and congestion mitigation and air quality funding. We're going to have to be a little more competitive next year in the redistribution process. We do plan to continue our meetings in a virtual format through at least the end of the calendar year, but we do look forward to getting back together in person in the future. And Madam Chair, that concludes my report. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. We do not have public comment on this item. Commissioners, are there any questions regarding Dawn's presentation? If not, thank you so much for your very thorough presentation, and we will see you next time.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. With that, we'll go to item 10, the Rural Counties Task Force Chair, Woodrow Deloria.
Well, good morning, Commissioners. Chair Norton, I am Woodrow Deloria, Chair of the Rural Counties Task Force and the Executive Director of the El Dorado County Transportation Commission. The RCTF welcomes Commissioner Falcone, and thank you for your leadership and support, Senator Commissioner Kehoe. The RCTF met on September 17th and discussed a wide range of issues and opportunities facing our rural 26 counties. We had a lengthy discussion about the new requirements included in AB 361 to allow for our agencies to continue to meet remotely, which many of the rural counties plan to do for the foreseeable future. Marlon Flournoy, Division Chief of Transportation Planning from Caltrans, also provided us with an update on the Innovative Concepts effort led by Caltrans. And RCTF appreciates the out-of-the-box approach of this effort to identify innovative transportation investments, which may not fit perfectly within an existing program or policy framework, but may be very effective in addressing many of the challenges that we face. Eric Fredericks of Caltrans Mass Transit also provided us with a detailed presentation of the statewide truck parking study, which identifies issues and opportunities to improve safety and efficiency of heavy truck travel, including operations on rural corridors, parking facilities, and agriculture distribution centers. Scott Sauer and Kathleen Hanley from Caltrans presented an update on the 2021 Interregional Transportation Strategic Plan, or ITSP, and we really appreciate Scott and other Caltrans staff coordinating this effort with the RCTF. The ITSP is a critical planning document for many of our rural counties who depend on a safe and effective interregional transportation network, which serves as the foundation of their economic prosperity. Scott and Kathleen were great partners throughout this effort, working extensively with RCTF members to identify key interregional corridors and priority facilities that will enhance safety and mobility throughout rural California. Through this outreach, it became clear that Caltrans recognizes that rural counties have a dire need for strategic infrastructure investments that improve safety, operations, connectivity, goods movement, and facilitate evacuation when wildfire threatens our rural communities. We look forward to working with the ITSP team to highlight the importance of these strategic investments on rural interregional routes throughout the development of the project selection in the ITIP. And lastly, on a more personal note, on behalf of all of El Dorado County, I want to thank Caltrans Director Elma Shakin and District 3 Director Amarjeet Benapal and all of the Caltrans team members who aided in the response to the Caldor fire. They worked tirelessly and were agile and creative throughout the response to this wildfire event. And the rural counties continue to integrate adaptation and resiliency into their planning and programming efforts to contribute to the wildfire mitigation mentioned by Director Omishakin earlier. And that concludes my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
That's great. I don't believe we have any public comment. I did want to ask you a question about the ribbons hanging above your head. What are they for?
My wife is an equestrian. She shows horses, so she wins some ribbons. Yes.
Fantastic. Well, congratulations. I don't believe we have any comments from commissioners. So with that, I want to thank you, Mr. DeLoria, and we will look forward to seeing you next time. Item 11, Self-Help Counties Coalition Executive Director, Keith Dunn.
Thank you, Chair Norton. I first would also like to extend my welcome and congratulate Commissioner Falcone on her appointment. And we look forward from the self-help counties, the 25 agencies that make up the coalition, to working with her as well as the rest of the commission moving forward. I need to also thank Senator Kehoe for her service. She was a tireless member of the legislature who put forward so many policy innovations. It's hard to list, but I can tell you that having spent the last 20 years working with the legislature, she was a leader in innovating project delivery. And without her leadership, we would still be far behind where we need to be. And she was a great asset to the transportation community. So we'd like to thank her for her continued service. Self-help counties had an interesting year, as the rest of the organizations did, dealing with COVID in the legislative process and regulatory arena up in Sacramento. We were successful having the governor sign an extension to our design build authority, Self-Help County sponsored in conjunction with the professional engineers in California government, to continue that authority for the state to utilize design build on the state highway system. That authority got extended out another decade beyond the original termination. So that's another tool that we continue to advocate for in project delivery, innovations, and how we manage the resources that we're entrusted with to deliver the projects that our citizens need to increase their mobility. So we're pleased that Governor Newsom acted upon that and appreciate his continued leadership in that arena. We last week, I guess it was, had one of our quarterly meetings with the department. We met, typically that's with Director Omishakin. He had other duties, so we met with his staff, Mike Keever and others, and really got a good opportunity to discuss some of the implementation areas for CAPTI and 743, and heard from the department on where they're putting their resources to make sure that they're complying with the new requirements under those guidelines. So it was a very positive discussion. I think the agencies appreciated the candor and opportunity to comment as those policies start to be implemented throughout our state. It's going to be an ongoing effort, and we look forward to supporting the department in making sure that those policies are being implemented as best as we can to follow the policy and also deliver on what the department needs to do to comply with their mission as well. So we're looking forward to that opportunity. We would like to thank the commission for all the workshops, as mentioned before. I think it's extremely helpful, and I would concur that having them available for folks to view post is very effective. And many of us have meetings throughout the day and can't always participate directly as in real time, but we'd like to thank Executive Director Weiss for his direction in making that happen. It's very much appreciated. Self-Help Counties is getting ready as the Mobility 21 conference comes to an end. We're following in their footsteps as we do every year for the Focus on the Future. We're looking forward to Chair Norton's comments. We'll hear from Director Omishakin and Secretary Kim as well as talking about some of the innovations in project delivery, and working, as Secretary Kim talked about, the governor's, to make sure that the governor's transportation proposal is supported in the legislature. There was a robust discussion that, as Secretary Kim mentioned, ongoing with the legislature. We're anxious to continue to support the governors and the legislature in coming to some agreement and doing all we can to make sure that California is in a position to compete if and when, and we're very hopeful that it will be if, or when that happens at the federal level, that we can go back and advocate for additional resources for the state of California. I think it's critical that the state is back in DC communicating with all of our elected Congress and senators that California has shown up with as much resources as we can muster, and that we get to the front of the line on any federal dollars that become available. With that, I would also like to commend Commissioner Eager on her taste in baseball teams. I fully endorse her recommendation that the Giants are the superior team and that Game 5 is critically important for everyone. So with that, I will I will say thank you for your time. I'm getting the that's what I would expect from Commissioner. But thank you very much for the opportunity. And as Californians, I think we can all agree that the best two teams are going to play in Game 5. So.
Well said. And can you remind people where and when Focus on the Future is? I mean,
yeah, I thank you for that. Responsibly, if not out of a begrudging need, it is virtual again. We are very much like the commission, looking forward to seeing all of our friends face to face. The conference will be virtual, held November 15th and 16th. There's announcements that come out to everyone, or you can just text me or email me and I can get you the information that you need. But it will be virtual, hopefully for the last year. I think that the vaccination program in California has gone a long way, and our scientists are getting a handle as much as anyone can on the virus. So we're very hopeful that this will be the last virtual conference. I think Mobility 21 and all the others that hold these types of events are anxiously awaiting the opportunity to return to in-person visits, because we miss seeing everyone and building on those relationships. So November 15th and 16th virtually, hopefully in person soon.
wonderful. Thank you. We have no public comment. Commissioners, are there any of you who'd like to say a few words about Keith Dunn's presentation? If not, I think you covered it, despite your choice in baseball teams. And we look forward to talking to you very soon. Thanks again.
Thank you very much.
Bye. With that, we are going to go to our Equity Advisory Roundtable update. And I have to say, point of privilege for the chair, that Stephanie Ramirez, who is about to be presenting today, she is one of those people that I just encourage you all to listen up. She's really an extraordinary woman. Her leadership with AARP, her leadership with Measure M has been extraordinary. And I always learn something from every time Stephanie speaks. So I just want to make sure that Sequoia, you talked a lot about what we're doing with the roundtables, and then I look forward to Stephanie Ramirez's presentation. Sequoia.
Thank you, Chair Norton. We're just going to dive into our updates today. So tab 12 is an informational update from Equity Advisory Roundtable members. Stephanie Ramirez and Leslie Sanders will provide separate updates focused on roundtable meetings and priorities. And our next roundtable meeting will be on October 28th. And we look forward to seeing as many of you as we can there. With that, I'll turn it over to Stephanie.
Stephanie, you're muted.
Okay, can folks hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Chairwoman Norton, for your kind words. I actually was reflecting a lot on what I wanted to say, and thank you for the time, not just to you, but to the staff, as well as the other commissioners, and also welcoming the new commissioner. I know how important your work is, particularly as a person. I like to say I'm a third generation public transportation user, and officially now my niece, we rode the Metro light rail here in Los Angeles, and now she can officially say she's a fourth generation user. And so that was really fun, and being able to share that experience with her. So I think, transportation is something that's, for me, is very personal. I definitely see the impact it makes in people's lives, and an economic one at that, a social one, with the work that I lead with AARP in helping older adults, live better lives. But also, transportation is the critical link to the services that they need and the lives that they want to lead. With that, I do want to focus my remarks to you all today around the Equity Roundtable. I think in one of what I've observed is, I'm honored to be part of this body of people, of vision. I want to thank you. I think I've seen not just the leadership that you all have taken to start this work, but also the commitment to bring on additional staff, additional capacity, and also for us to have, I think, really authentic and frank discussions. I know that a lot of the work that we're doing is not easy work. It requires us to be not only accountable, I think, to what we've signed up for, but I think accountable to ourselves. So there's been a lot of frank conversations that are uncomfortable. And I mean, I know that I can say for me, I very quickly learned that this wasn't something that I can show up and sort of just check off as something that I did, but how do I bring, my authentic self, my experiences, and also how do I hold myself accountable to be an active listener, to make space when it's needed for others to share their experiences and their wisdom, particularly on, some of the population groups that I necessarily don't work with or don't have experience with. I know that Leslie will be talking about that. Our last meeting, it was something really poignant for me, and I think transformational as I do my work. But Leslie, particularly talking about how do you work with the indigenous population, not just native to California, but really thinking about how you work with tribal leaders as opposed to tribal community members. And that to me is something that definitely, how do I take that and even work within my organization? And so I already see the impact of this work, not just in the transportation project, but me as a member taking it back to my organization. And so I think one of the takeaways that I want to leave you all with as commissioners is, we need your continued support on this, your continued leadership, but also that understanding that equity work takes time. I know that a lot of the times we want to see this like linear approach to projects where, if this happens, then this is the next outcome, and, we're moving steps ahead, planning ahead. And I don't think that that's sort of been my experience in doing this work and even seeing it come to fruition through the Equity Advisory Roundtable. I think one of our advisory table members, I think, says it best, Ria Oshas, who I think has challenged us to not only listen actively to what others are saying, but really take the pause to reflect. And so to really reflect and sort of challenge the preconceptions that we have. And then, once we have done that reflection, how do we come back and are able to actively engage with the group and ourselves to move this work forward? And so that isn't always sort of how we do work, right? And so being able to understand that, to have a commitment that sort of, this work doesn't have like an expiration date where it ends. It's ongoing. And so that sometimes those difficult conversations that we have, those pauses, something different comes up because we are addressing sort of these hard issues around inequality and racism and privilege. that are not sort of these quick fixes. And so with that, I again want to thank you for this time to be able to talk with you all. And I'm gonna, I guess, yield the floor to Leslie for her remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Leslie Sanders, we're looking forward to your presentation as well. And we do have some people who have questions. So if you wouldn't mind, Stephanie, staying live so that we can have questions of both of you after the presentations.
Sounds good.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Sanders.
Good morning. Can you hear me all right?
Sure can.
Perfect. Thank you so much for this opportunity to present to the CTC Commission. As Stephanie mentioned, thank you so much for the opportunity and the honor to sit on the CTC Equity Roundtable, for providing an opportunity for tribes to have a voice. There's been such a deep history of inequities in the United States, in California, that continues to impact transportation systems. From decades of policies and programs prioritizing infrastructure for vehicles over active transportation systems such as walking and biking and public transit, to the inequities in transportation funding in historically disadvantaged communities. Not all communities and individuals are able to enjoy or access the full benefits of our transportation system. I work for a tribe in rural Northern California, and I sit on a commission of 11 federally recognized tribes in Humboldt County and Del Norte. In the words of Caltrans Omishakin, transportation is meant to bring people together, bridge divides, cross immovable boundaries, and connect people from all walks of life. These words are echoed throughout transportation in California. However, we can't accomplish this mission until we begin addressing the fact that despite all of the advances that have been made, there's a racial bias that continues to exist. And this bias is often so subtle or ingrained in those that are perpetrating it that they're not even aware of it. Tribal communities have had to endure lifetimes of being told that others know best, whether it be where they live or how to live. And this same attitude of others knowing best has been ingrained in transportation. And just as troubling is improvements and changes made in the name of transportation safety have oftentimes created more harm to these tribal communities. So sitting on this equity roundtable has provided us an opportunity to express the need for, actually, as Stephanie said, listening, reflecting, looking at transportation issues in a light that is not always looked at brightly. Northern California tribes, we face inequities that Southern California tribes may not face. Tribes throughout California are distinct, and there's no one size that will fit any tribe. There's not one fix that will fix every tribe's issues. However, the one thing that can be brought forward is including tribes in the very beginning of any process. Bring them into the initial stages of planning. If you really want to get tribes to engage, and tribes throughout California, bring it in the initial stages. Do not wait until plans have been devised and come up with, and then say, okay, we're going to have these meetings, it's going to be here, and we want to engage with you. And that will not work for tribes. They need to be brought in the beginning. And see, I recognize all the great strides CTC has made in recognizing tribal needs, and recognizing that we do face a multiple amount of roadblocks that not all agencies are facing. And we appreciate the support that CTC has provided tribes, and we look forward to ongoing workshops and avenues of communication for future change.
Thank you so much. This has been very, very helpful. And we appreciate you recognizing CTC's outreach in this regard. We do have some comments and are checking about the public comment side, but very first, I'd like to recognize Commissioner Falcone, who had some comments.
Thanks so much, Chair Norton. I do want to talk about this item, but I would be remiss if I didn't bring to attention, since we were talking about baseball. Don't forget your southern sister. What we lack in wins, we had excitement this year. So on this issue, it's very personal to me. I was happy to be the first meeting that I attended related to CTC was the Equity Advisory Roundtable. And, I just really want to express appreciation to Sequoia and Stephanie and Leslie for their presentations. And, equity is such a large body of work. And, I'm really interested in seeing how we incorporate equity in this group into some of our serious policy issues as it relates to what we do in the CTC. And so, and what those are, I don't know, but, certainly if I see opportunities or any of my fellow commissioners see opportunities to engage this group meaningfully on equity as it relates to the decisions we make, I wholeheartedly welcome that. I worked in very impacted communities when I was working in the legislature, and still live in communities, particularly in the port side of San Diego, and really appreciate how some of the transportation projects, even though they're absolutely important to the region, how they've impacted communities, and I'm really interested in hearing what comes out of the listening tours. And I think that Secretary Kim and Director Omashakin mentioned. And so just wanted to express that and appreciate the work that you're all doing in the presentations. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Falcone. Next, I see Commissioner Liu.
Thank you, Chair Norton. And I have to agree with our new commissioner, Commissioner Falcone, on a couple of levels. I mean, one, I grew up in Los Angeles, but I married into a Padres family, so I'll have to go with the Padres officially. But I can agree with Secretary Kim on one thing, who is also a fellow hockey fan, and that's Go Kings. So not Sacramento Kings, the LA Kings. But let's get back to this. I also want to agree with Commissioner Falcone on just thanking Stephanie and Leslie for the hard work that they're putting in, and the rest of our roundtable advisory group members, because I know it's hard work. I just want to take this time to acknowledge that you are spending your valuable time helping us, and we know that there's no expiration date on the issues, like you said, Stephanie, and we know how important that Native American tribal perspectives are when we consider these things, Leslie. So I just wanted to say, that I think I can speak on behalf of everyone here, the agency, the department, all of our CTC staff, and our fellow commissioners, and saying thank you for doing this. We very much appreciate it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I see that we have no public comment and no other commissioners who wish to speak. So I want to thank you for your time and for being such great participants and for teaching us something every time we meet. Thank you for your time and for your presentation today.
Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we'll go to item 13, innovations in transportation, big data. Sequoia.
Thank you, Chair Norton. I'll be covering Bridget's items today. So, Commissioners, tab 13 is an informational presentation on innovations in transportation. Laura Jewell, founder and chief executive officer of Streetlight Data, will provide a presentation on how big data is helping government agencies to better understand and predict travel trends. You will also hear from Sean Charpentier, Executive Director of the City County Association of Governments in San Mateo County. Mr. Charpentier will be joined by Kaki Chung and present several case studies highlighting how local agencies have used streetlight data to inform their transportation planning and decision making. With that, I will turn it over to Laura. Thank you.
Thanks, Sequoia, and thank you all for letting us present with this group. We're very excited to be here. So next slide, please. I will talk a little bit about Streetlight at a high level and our mission of better data for better transportation. And then I'll hand it over to our partners at CCAG to give you some concrete examples of implementation. And of course, I'm excited to answer any questions you may have. Next slide, please. So I founded Streetlight 11 years ago. It was a spin out of my PhD at UC Berkeley, so go Bears, to diversify the sports conversation. And it came about because I believed and still believe that transportation is one of the most important things that need to change. It is the dominant source of greenhouse gas emissions, it's extraordinarily unsafe, it damages our lung health, and not to mention it has a huge impact on our economy. And certainly 11 years ago, we were making extraordinarily big decisions about transportation with extraordinarily little data. And while a lot of progress has been made in the decade since, we're still a bit too much in that position. The world of transportation is too dynamic to rely on what is still the dominant source of data, things like you see on the slide, temporary loop counters that are put out and just count cars for 2 days, things like this. And in addition to the dynamism we see naturally in transportation, which of course has been accelerated by COVID, we generally, and in particular we in California, want to make it change even more. We want to reduce greenhouse gases, we want to improve equity, we want to improve health outcomes associated with transportation. So we're not just trying to deal with a complex system, we're trying to change it in a huge way. And to do all that management of transportation without measuring it struck me as fundamentally absurd. And that's the way and the reason I created Streetlight. Next slide, please. It was the right time to create Streetlight because a lot of other technologies have emerged that make it possible to measure in very new ways. So we license trillions of data points from smartphones, from connected cars, from connected trucks and fleet management systems, etc. That's a beautiful big pile of data. To make sense out of it, we mix it with things like data from Caltrans's own sensors, We pull in land use data, demographics, survey data, weather, all kinds of stuff, and pull all of that together to create a set of actionable analytics. Because data is just data. Nobody actually wants data. What we really want is analytics that help us make a decision. So on the next slide, you can see some of the analytics that we create. They are the classic in transportation, but some are especially important to California. So for example, we can create VMT estimates for anything as small as an off-ramp or a tiny little block up to VMT estimates for a whole county. And that's been really important in California, and we've done a ton of projects recently on the SB 743 implementation as projects are finally starting to roll. Also, to the last conversation about equity, I think often in transportation, because of a lack of data, the question of what is an equitable investment also often has to do with where people live, which is good, but not sufficient. All of our metrics we allow to be run with demographics that say, where do people go? Which is a different way at looking at equitable investment and sometimes can point you to different decisions. So that's another element. That's why analytics together are more valuable than just a pile of data. And on the next slide, one of the reasons we've been successful is because we are not consultants telling agencies what to do. We have created a tool where agency staff and engineering staff can train themselves very quickly, like in 10 minutes, and can start to answer their own questions. So it is not a consultancy, it's a tool, and hundreds of agency staff across California, as well as engineering firm staff, know how to go in and tackle their own questions and explore data with their own curiosity. I mean, they can do that for anywhere and for any mode. Any road, any mode, anywhere is our slogan. We cover all the different modes of transportation because also it's not just about cars anymore, it's about all the different modes and how they interact. So next slide, please. That was a very quick technical summary, and I'm happy to answer your questions. Could we have the next slide with a little map? Great. So we have been successful. We are based in San Francisco, California small business, but we operate across the US and Canada. We have a ton of work in California, and one of my favorite stats is in the past 2 years, over 22,000 California-based analytics have been run in our tool, which means 22,000 times in the past 2 years, someone had a question about some transportation behavior in California, and they needed to make a decision. And they could quick go in and get their answer in a few clicks in a few minutes, instead of going out and doing a survey, putting out some sensors, or most probably not getting any data at all and just making a guess. And the use cases that Sean will tell you about really range. But while I have the ear of this high-level body, I wanted to make one final point about my vision for big data in transportation. So on the next slide, please. What we see to really get to better transportation decisions with better data, you have to marry very high-level strategic data-driven thinking. Questions like, how do we measure if we're progressing towards our greenhouse gas emissions goal and what is working and what's not, with bottom-up use of data where everybody making a decision who's working on a transportation decision in California has data at their fingertips, and being data-driven is just part of your everyday work, not a special, okay, now we're in the data collection phase of the project and that'll take months, and then we'll move into the implementation or the planning phase. So it's those two things together, and since you all are at the top, I want to talk a little bit about that. So next slide, please. And then if you click it a few times, I think all the pieces will fill in and that will be better. So in the current world, we do some measurements, baseline, then we make a prediction, maybe it's a cost benefit assessment, maybe it's a travel demand model, and then we implement some plan. And what has happened in the past decade with lots of big data solutions, of which StreetLight is just one, is that our measurement has gotten vastly better at the beginning of that flow. And that is awesome. Because if there's better data going in, the predictions will be more accurate and thoughtful, and the implementation will be more successful. So I'm delighted with that. But as we move forward into a more complex future and one in which we're trying to change, I think we need to shift the whole flow into something that's more iterative, where we start by measuring and then we predict. And California is asking to predict more complex things, not just congestion, but also VMT and equity and greenhouse gas emissions. And then we implement. But then we need to measure again, because nobody in the US has a good history of before and after studies. So we make all these predictions and do not rigorously follow up to see if we were right. And I suspect a lot of the time we're wrong, especially when we're trying to predict something that has never been systemically predicted before, like VMT impacts of the development. There's no way that even the best academics are gonna have the tools to predict it well. We need to do before and after studies for everything, acknowledge that we'll be wrong, adjust our plan, then remeasure, and then in a few years replan because something else insane like a COVID-19 pandemic is going to happen again. And this approach to iterative planning and holding ourselves accountable is now possible because systemic, persistent measurement of any metric we want is now very cost effective. So that's the big picture mission I wanted to share with this group. But what is more exciting is to hear from Sean about all the very specific things that have been going on down in CCAG. And I think you might be on mute, Sean. That will go on mute.
Can you hear me now? Thank you for this opportunity to present. My name is Sean Charpentier, and I'm the Executive Director of the City and County Association of Governments of San Mateo County, also known as CCAG. CCAG is the CMA and CTA for San Mateo County. CCAG represents all of San Mateo County, and our Board of Directors has 1 seat for each of the 21 jurisdictions. We are a built-out county and committed to increasing mobility and person throughput while reducing GHG. Our strategies to accomplish this include pricing. We are a founding member of the San Mateo County Express Lanes JPA, investing in active transportation, transit and shuttle projects and programs, and implementing our updated countywide TDM policy. Another key strategy is to make sure we make more efficient use of the infrastructure we have. Next slide, please. Big data, such as Streetlight, provides more granular information, larger data sets, historical data, and origin and destination data. This information is essential to our effort to improve the efficiency of our existing roadway system. To accomplish this, CCAG created a countywide partnership with Streetlight and our member agencies through a 3-year joint subscription model. The joint subscription model allows all jurisdictions to participate and is used by 18 participants. The cost to each participant is based on the population. The joint subscription model helps to reduce the cost, and we estimate that the pooling of the resources has saved more than $1.2 million over the 3-year term of the contract. The 18 member agencies use Streetlight extensively. There have been more than 800 analyses run in just over a year, which equals approximately 3 analyses run per workday. Now I'd like to summarize 3 examples of how we've used Streetlight data. Next slide, please. Samtrans is the bus transit provider in our county. Samtrans currently operates a commuter express bus between Foster City and downtown San Francisco. Samtrans used Streetlight data to analyze the traffic patterns in this busy Highway 101 corridor. The Streetlight analysis showed that peaks of trips did not align with the existing bus schedule. Samtrans adjusted the AM and PM schedules based on the Streetlight data and saw a 30% increase in ridership. Next slide, please. The city of San Mateo used Streetlight data to analyze the pre-COVID and COVID period cut-through traffic in the San Mateo Village neighborhood, which is a neighborhood surrounded by state highways and identified as a local high-priority equity-focused area. The data indicated that there was a 40% decrease in cut-through traffic during the COVID crisis. This information helped the city work on the appropriate timeline and process to identify potential mitigations for cut-through traffic. Next slide, please. The city of Belmont used Streetlight data to assist in the processing of entitlements for a 123-unit affordable housing project. The traffic impact analysis was prepared during the height of the COVID crisis and reflected atypically reduced traffic volumes. The city used the historical Streetlight data, including the significantly larger data sets, to identify pre-COVID traffic at the study intersections, and then used this data to inform the potential traffic mitigations for the project. There's an important equity component here as well. Our joint subscription model allows under-resourced cities to participate in the program in the case when a single subscription may have been cost prohibitive, and the examples of increasing transit ridership, analyzing cut-through traffic, and supporting affordable housing development all have positive equity outcomes. We appreciate the opportunity to present on this topic and the CTC's longstanding support for CCAG's projects and programs. And that concludes my portion of the presentation, and I'd like to turn it back to Laura.
Thank you, Sean. I think no one could have summarized the breadth of examples better than that. So I'm happy to take any questions, of course.
Wonderful. While we're finding out what we have in terms of public comment, I see we have none. I would like to ask about a couple of things, and that is that we at CTC are always looking to establish a more multimodal system. So, and to look at how we can see what's happening on our highway network, for example, and how improvements in the highway network can maybe reduce congestion in communities. So it may seem like the highway is more congested, but it's because we're trying to bring truck and car traffic back onto the main thoroughfares, right? How can we demonstrate that with streetlight data, improvements over the system, safety over the system, so that you're actually can show that you've reduced the number of vehicles on community streets while pushing those vehicles back onto the major thoroughfares, and maybe even encouraging those routes to become better bus routes, so we can actually make the former drivers into transit riders. It would be helpful to, and I really wanted to have you peel more of the before and after data, because we are very interested in looking at before and after metrics on lots of our programs.
Yes, and this is my personal theme of the year. I will also mention that I think because lots of folks, including us, pushed for it when the infrastructure bill passes. There's a special section 11205 to fund experimental before and after studies, and I really hope that when that passes, Caltrans in California step up to bring in some of the projects that you're talking about to get DOT and DOE level attention on it. But wonderful. Basically, the answer is the before and after study. We have data on every road for every mode in California going back several years. So all we would have to do is pick three, find some times when we thought this was the intention, and then systemically, every month we can light up very cool maps if we like cool maps, or just simple charts that show that sucking up of the travel by the major thoroughfares. And we have a very cool case study that is exactly this at a small scale. Historically, in a Bay Area city that was experiencing what they believe to be called the Waze effect, where there was a terrible traffic jam on the highway. People hop up, cut through the local roads. I have one, our head of engineering once said he had to leave his car at his friend's house and walk 20 minutes home because his kids were home alone and there were so many cut-through drivers in his neighborhood that he couldn't get home. Right. So we have a great before and after study that shows them successfully pulling cars back to the main thing. So all we have to do is do that a bunch of times. And it's nice to show that what you did in the past worked, but also if you're trying to justify the next one, it's very helpful if you can show that it actually works.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And we'll make a note of the section in the infrastructure bill.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Section 11205, yes.
Thank you so much. Commissioner Liu, I see you have popped up, and then after that, I'll call on Commissioner Grigsby.
Great, thank you. And Laura, I'll just have to start with saying that my son is a freshman at Berkeley, so I can be on board with Go Bears.
Okay.
A few things. The first, you've heard about our prioritization of greenhouse gas reductions and transportation equity goals. How can you use data analytics to help us minimize the impacts on greenhouse gases and adverse transportation equity impacts on, while not screwing up mobility at the same time? I mean, is this something that your data analytics could do?
It can help. It can't solve the problem. I mean, data is always just a tool to make smart people's jobs easier, right? It's a means to an end. It's not an end itself. So I think the most important thing is California has the most ambitious greenhouse gas targets for transportation and some of the most ambitious targets for equity anywhere. And we are making decisions based on these encoded set of beliefs. For example, if we add a bike lane, we have encoded beliefs that it will reduce vehicle miles traveled and associated greenhouse gas emissions by X thousand trips per year. And that is where we have to start. But we don't know if they're right. And even if they were right 3 years ago when, UC Davis did their amazing study on this, they may not be right after COVID, or they may not be right in a more urban context, or they may not be right in a more rural context. So it doesn't mean we don't start on all of our SB 743 and other, we totally start and we go as hard as we can, but we check, because it is going to happen that we get some of them wrong. For example, we've done some before and after bike lane studies. We're in Canada, not in California, that showed that bike lanes increased bike ridership on the bike lane, which is awesome, but decreased bike ridership on the other roads, sort of like Commissioner Norton's example, but for bikes, which is excellent for safety. So great safety outcome, but maybe not neutral for greenhouse gases. So these are the sort of things we have to get very rigorous about. So I don't mean it to say we don't start till we have information. You got to start, 30 years ago, but certainly now. But we measure so that we're honing our decisions and doing the best we can at every step. So that's, I think, the best way we do that. And while we have poor data and history in projecting greenhouse gas emissions, our history and projections on equity is way worse. We don't even have systemic definitions nationally, and they're conflicting definitions within the state on what it means to improve transportation equity. So we have to come at that with intention, but a lot of humbleness and openness to make mistakes. So I think that's really important. And in terms of screwing up mobility, I tend to be climate first, and I'm willing to screw a few things up. And I don't think we're going to hit our ambitious climate goals without significant change. So we also have to acknowledge that it won't be the same.
Right.
But COVID has showed us that we can accommodate a whole lot of change and be okay.
Yeah. So I think what I'm hearing from you kind of answers my second question, which had to, do in part with the case study about transit ridership, is how do we use the big data and the data analytics to, encourage people to get out of single occupancy vehicles and do things like bike and walk and telecommute. It sounds to me like you think we can use the data in a way to test it under specific conditions, providing us with predictive capabilities that are more accurate and tracked and then reassessed and adjusted over time. That's
What's so brilliant about CCAG's example is that they didn't have to build a new bus line. They just shifted, right? Yeah. And those are the things that are going to be the really big
win-win,
high value wins.
So one of the other things that we're dealing with is this concept of a road user charge, per mile fee for vehicles, and I chair the road user charge technical advisory group, and we grapple a lot with the issue of privacy. So how do you deal with privacy with all the data you're collecting?
It's a great question. So we have an advantage over most road user charge schemes, which is that we don't care about you as an individual. So we're not tracking Commissioner Liu, we're not tracking your phone number or your advertising ID or anything like that, right? We're getting data that in the privacy CCPA terminology is de-identified, and then we're aggregating. Mm-hmm. So we deal with it by never knowing anything about any individual and never tracking any PII in our systems, and only providing aggregate analytics so no user could ever backtrack any individual behavior.
So you're not solving my road user charge
Nope.
problem. But you
I've avoided your road user problem. That's how we set up our company. I will say that, road user charges carry those risks, but we've had electronic data-driven tolling systems for a long time too, and we've done pretty well with those. So I think it's not as my CTO says, it's not rocket science to figure out how to protect privacy. It's just some work. There are problems that are rocket science. This, I think, is just some work.
Yeah, well, we're taking it up at our next meeting, so I encourage everybody to participate in it and offer their opinions on how we can do it best. One thing that you mentioned, it seems to mostly do with traditional movement of people, but we were talking earlier about the movement of goods and the challenges with the supply chain. Do you see this type of data analytical capabilities being used to maximize efficiency and solve some of our hiccups in the supply chain realm?
A bit, yes. We have a specialty commercial trucks product, which is actually one of the more popular products within California, especially for Caltrans statewide purchasing. And we've done a lot of work in various ports around the US about reducing truck traffic jams, which is one small part of your problem. So again, it's a partial help, not a full help.
Okay, well, wonderful. Thank you so much for your presentation. Very much appreciated.
For your questions.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Commissioner Liu. I want to go next to Commissioner Grisby.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Laura. I've been a big fan of Streetlight for a long time, so thank you for being here and for your comments. My question's about real-time transit data. And for the last 10 years, I've been really excited about the potential of that data, but there's been a lot of, I guess, issues on the ground in some places when it comes to actually having that be good for the customer, having actual clean data for them, and also what we can do for prediction around that. And I wanted to hear what you had to say about that.
I think we have set up a system where I believe in the Bay Area, depending on how you count, there are 46 separate transit agencies. There's just a fundamental, there's going to be a fundamental data quality problem when you have that kind of diversity. Now, there's lots of benefits to that kind of diversity, but it is going to set up a challenge for real-time data. So I think the solutions are, first of all, as we fund these agencies, I think there's a notion that things that are digital are free and easy, and they're not. You have to invest in like a professional who does data cleansing and data maintenance. And we often, especially with some of the open data initiatives, I see this notion that they're sort of dumping data into the public, whether it's bus data or bike counts or anything else. And then when you look at it, when we really look at it, there's huge problems. And if you look at it lightly, you're going to draw on work. So I think one thing is investing in data maintenance and seeing that just like you have to maintain your asphalt, you're going to have to maintain your data, and getting that mindset in. And that's, I often see as a gap. At the state level, I think there's a huge need for improved, you could call it data science. I would really call it data engineering or data quality. You could envision, and what we've done is we've created statewide user groups of people who are all learning how to use data together. So I think there's also opportunity for professional development in data maintenance and data science, which is a very cool modern skill that I think a lot of younger and older staff are very excited to have. But in terms of the quality, it comes down to investing in the maintenance, establishing some standards, preferably national, not 50 different state standards for what should be shared, and then making sure that the state has the incentive and the talent to get the data out. But with the way the California transit systems are set up, I think there's just going to have to be a lot of groundwork because of that fragmentation.
Yeah.
And one more question, which is, when I lived in DC, I noticed that it was a lot easier to get multimodal information and apps, such as where the closest scooter might be, or what the bike share count might be at the bike share corral. And it's not necessarily the case in most places in California. And I'm wondering if you have any insight on why that is the case, and if that's a policy issue.
I think, again, it comes down to fragmentation. DC being one city can make more unified decisions. So there can be a policy that ties funding to certain sorts of data disclosures and standards. And I know in Southern California, there's been some discussions around that, in LA in particular. I think that's what it would take, because otherwise it's not the agent, it's expensive to maintain and publish data, so that they need an incentive to do it. Actually, Sean, you might have better insights on that than I do, on working with all your 18 city folks, or localities, I should say.
I don't know if I have anything to add to it. It is a little bit easier with one entity, of course, but fragmentation is, as shown in the CCAG joint subscription model, can also be overcome. It takes process and working with all the partners as well.
I will say there are several tech companies that are trying to publish standards and create platforms and enable this, which is good. But now we're seeing these different tech coalitions come out with their own sort of standards and systems, which maybe it's okay if there's only 2 or 3 in the world, but that is the private sector stepping into where the public sector maybe could have or should have established the data standards. And the best ones are collaborating, like the Society of Automotive Engineers is running a system that's collaborating with a bunch of local agencies to try to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you. We also have Commissioner Falcone and then Executive Director Weiss would like to speak, and we have some public comment as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks for the presentation, Laura. Commissioner Grisby talked about scooters or mentioned it, and that's kind of my question on the shared mobility devices, and you know, it's been a phenomena that's really has really increased in the past few years, and I know that at least in San Diego, it's been in the region of San Diego, it's been an industry that's been flourishing. And working with SANDAG and some of the municipalities on data sharing from those devices. Do you see that happening statewide and in the work that you do? What the intention there is to help inform regional transit planning agencies and cities on where to put, where they should make investments in bike lane infrastructure, et cetera. So just wanted to get your feedback.
So we saw that conversation diminish during COVID, but for obvious reasons, now it's coming back. I think that it would be great if the scooter systems can share their data. I think some of the ways that were initially proposed did not have privacy in mind or as a first priority. They required individual trip level data to be dumped into a FOIA-able, hackable state system that could show me scootering from my house to the abortion clinic or to the cancer clinic, or a state official going to certain types of meetings. So I think there were some privacy errors out the gate, but that's fine. Like, errors out the gate is fine. So I do think that the scooter systems can and should, in their new standards, the ones in SoCal, that can be asked to share appropriate aggregate data. But I also would like to point out that I know the scooter systems are operated by private companies, and that makes them different. But scooters are still a very small mode compared to all the rest. And I'd like to see the same energy around data collection for planning applied to other modes of travel too. Though I know that the scooters, because they're so new, pull a lot of public attention.
Yes. Does that complete your questions, Commissioner Falcone? Wonderful. Now, Executive Director Weiss, and then we'll move to public comment.
So first a comment and then a question. I find this all really exciting. I remember a number of years ago, I was talking to a high-level planner and suggested the idea that, after we do these 5-year plans, maybe we ought to check in once a year and see how things are. And I just got to laugh. So I would love to do that. I know there are some of our big NPOs and regional transportation planning agencies who are doing some of this beyond what Sean's doing, or in addition to what Sean's doing. I think there's a big role for Caltrans, and I would love to see how we as a commission can be supportive of Caltrans taking on that role, given their key role in statewide planning and perhaps as helping some of the smaller regions. So I just want to throw that out there for the Caltrans folks. Let's continue these conversations. The second is just a question, because I don't know a lot about this stuff, and I just am interested in numbers. I get how we capture data from vehicles, be it cars or buses. How do we get data on biking and pedestrians?
From smartphones. So we partner with a couple hundred different smartphone apps to pull de-identified and then aggregated locational data. Phone is in your pocket when you bike to the bus, then when you hop on the bus, when ride it, and then when you walk after that. So that's why the smartphones are so valuable.
So, are there assumptions based on speed, or is the dynamometer enough to tell you?
It's more than that. This is one of the benefits of machine learning. That's a term that gets thrown around here a lot. Basically, we have a bunch of people who go about their day, who are our contractors. Then they go home and under contract tag exactly what they did, and that helps us learn how to recognize. Because you can bike faster than a car in congested downtown San Francisco. So it's a very contextualized approach that looks at urban versus rural and all kinds of other stuff too.
Okay.
Machine learning is the short answer.
Yes. Thank you so much. Justin, could you tee up our public comments?
Thank you, Chair Norton. This first written comment may have been addressed already, but it comes from Angelo Logan. He writes, does streetlight data include freight transportation?
Yes. So I'd say a very technical answer is we include commercial trucks. we are exploring ways to understand more what is on the trucks.
Great.
Thank you.
Great.
We have one more question also coming from Angelo Logan. He writes, do you have plans to expand your work related to freight transportation and goods movement beyond commercial trucks?
Yes. So one of the really interesting data science questions is, for me, is delivery. We do lots of analytics on delivery, but delivery is starting to happen in non-commercial trucks. So what is the vehicle that is used for Amazon package delivery in the morning and then to pick up kids from gymnastics practice in the afternoon? I think this is a really important question. So we're doing some research on that. We are also launching some boat modes in the future. I think the first will be ferry, but are exploring freight boats.
Great. I'm pleased to hear that you have a number of different phone apps, because there had been some concerns about only using, say, AT&T and Verizon and not using Cricket, or some things about equity in how to do cellular data. So I'm very, very pleased to see the next generations having more equity in that kind of information.
That's one of the reasons we did it. We also cover pay-per-use phones, phones without contract. So
Nice.
When we look at the demographic split of our data, it's not perfect. But it is vastly more representative from the outset than, for most importantly, survey response rates, which are highly skewed and which create a lot of the data that goes into transportation decisions. And then, of course, we do statistical normalization from there.
Well, this is fantastic, and I think we probably want to have more conversation as part of the equity roundtables as well, as you're learning about how to get more equity outcomes. But this is fascinating, and I want to thank you for the time and the different use cases that you presented today. Thank you very much.
Our pleasure. Thank you for having us.
Wonderful. Okay. Commissioners, we are going to now go to items 14 and 15, and then we're going to have a lunch break. So, Paul, if you would lead us through those two items, please.
Yep. Commissioners, tab 14 is an information item. Will be presented by Caltrans with an update on the state budget, as well as the utilization of our allocation capacity to fund transportation projects. Keith Duncan from Caltrans Division of Budgets has a presentation prepared for you, and then Chair Norton, after Keith's presentation, I'd like to make a few comments.
Fantastic. We'll contact you right after. Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Duncan.
you, Paul. Thank you. Madam Chair, Commissioners, good afternoon. As mentioned, Keith Duncan with the Caltrans Division of Budgets, and I'll be providing the budget and allocation capacity update for you today. Next slide, please. To begin, a quick status check in regards to commission activities. Through August, the commission has allocated about $1.4 billion of the total $8.2 billion available for the current fiscal year across the transportation programs within the CTC's purview. That represents about 17% total allocated for the year. The highlight being the shop, which is a little over $1 billion allocated through August, is about 25% allocated. Next slide, please. Next, we wanted to share a quick G12 progress report through August. As you're well aware, the G12 represents the delegated authority within both the shop and the STIP guidelines from the commission to the department to make adjustments to project funding within certain thresholds. For those projects less than $1 million, the department is able to make an adjustment of a maximum of $200,000. And for those projects at $1 million or more, we're able to make adjustments of $200,000 plus 10% of those project allocations. For any adjustments above those thresholds, we're required to come to the commission for approval. In total, through the month of August, the department has made adjustments to 41 projects, and those 41 projects have a total value of almost $400 million. And the adjustments resulted in a net savings of about $19.2 million. To be more specific, within the shop, we made adjustments to 38 projects valued about $366 million, with a net savings of about $19.8 million, and that savings is then returned to the shop allocation capacity for the current year for allocating to additional projects. And then for the STIP, we had made adjustments to 3 projects totaling about $30 million, with a net increase of just over $570,000 so far through August. Next slide, please. As I know, Mr. Mamano would probably have already provided this, so I'm happy to share an August redistribution update. As referenced on the slide, the August redistribution is the process where FHWA redistributes any unused obligation authority to the states that demonstrate a need, and California has been quite successful year after year. In total, over the last 10 years, California has received $2.9 billion of additional obligation authority as a result of the August redistribution process. And for this last federal fiscal year of 2021, we received just under $402 million, with $255 million, roughly $255 million going to state SHOP projects, the SHOP program, as well as about $147 million going to local agency for their respective projects. The last bullet there, when it comes to the August distribution process, we typically receive notice towards the end of August, and that funding that we receive must be obligated no later than the end of the federal fiscal year. So it is a collaborative, coordinated approach, and I want to make sure we acknowledge folks within the Caltrans family, within our Office of Federal Resources, Local Assistance Program, Financial Program, as well as our local agency partners and our partners at FHWA. Within just about a 3-week period, we were able to successfully obligate that $402 million to ensure that we got it to work or got it on projects and we didn't lose any of that. So a shout out to everybody involved in that entire process. Next slide, please. Here, we just wanted to show how each of the last 10 years, how we've progressed when it comes to the August redistribution. Within the current year, as referenced around the far right, you can see we received about $402 million. That is the third highest amount that we've received over the last 10 years, with last year, 2020, being the highest amount of about $494 million. While it is less than what we received last year, $402 million, we're definitely proud to receive that and get it to work on projects. Next slide, please. Here, as has already been echoed throughout, California is quite competitive, so we just wanted to show how our 10-year total of $2.9 billion that we've received through August redistribution compares to other states. Here, as you can see, the state of Texas is in a, won't say close second, but second place when it comes to the states receiving August redistribution. Texas received about $2.5 billion over the last 10 years, with Florida, New York, and Pennsylvania being third, fourth, and fifth on that list. And they've received a little under $2 billion in total for the 10-year process. So California is still doing quite well in comparison when we look at a 10-year total. Next slide, please. Given the current budget year of 2020, 21-22 has been a unique budgetary process, we wanted to make sure we provide a couple budget updates for some major programs and initiatives that were kicked off for this fiscal year. The first being the Broadband Middle Mile Initiative. In that Caltrans will be receiving additional reimbursement authority over the next 6 years to help the administration's effort to achieve equitable statewide access to high-speed broadband internet service throughout the state. The intent is we are partnering with the California Department of Technology as well as the California Public Utility Commission to install broadband infrastructure on our state's right-of-way so we can work to provide those services to those communities that need it. The next item here, when it comes to earmark projects, with the passage of Senate Bill 170, that included required several state agencies to allocate general fund monies to specific legislative priority projects. And within that bill, there was about 24 projects identified for Caltrans to allocate. We're just awaiting for some further guidance, and we can begin in the coming days and weeks to begin the allocation process to the respective local agencies for those identified projects. And for the next 3 items, I know they've already been referenced, the $500 million of general fund funding for the active transportation program augmentation, the $400 million for the climate adaptation, as well as the $2.5 billion proposal for the agency transit and rail infrastructure. Those 3 items did not receive the necessary legislation by the October 10th deadline that was identified in the supplemental budget bill. So those general fund funds will return to the general fund, a lot of repetition there. But we do understand that that funding will be made available for future negotiations when it comes to potentially these 3 important initiatives. Next slide, please. In looking ahead for upcoming events, this one's kind of jumps around a little bit, but on October 2nd, President Biden did sign into law a 30-day extension of the Highway Trust Fund. So what that did for us is it provided us a 30-day funding or an extension of FAST Act for up to 30 days. FHWA is expecting to release on October 15th, so in just a couple days, what that amount of apportionment would be for the states for this 30-day temporary funding extension. So we'll be able to begin obligating that funding onto those projects. And we'll continue to monitor Congress's deliberation of the transportation reauthorization and the bipartisan infrastructure bill that we continue to hear further updates day by day. Coincidentally, as well as concurrently, President Biden also signed at the end of September a continuing resolution to avoid a partial government shutdown, and that continuing resolution is set to expire on December 3rd. While the extension of the FAST Act and the continuing resolution are two separate actions that we're monitoring, we will continue to monitor both for potential impacts to the state's federal funding. And lastly, as noted on the slide, the beginning of the next budget cycle for 2022-2023 begins with the release of the governor's proposed budget on January 10th. That's when we'll begin the formal deliberation process for our next upcoming fiscal year. Next slide, please. With that, I would like to offer my thanks to CTC staff, Caltrans Financial Programming, Caltrans Budget Revenue and Forecasting Team for everyone's help and support with today's presentation. And prior to opening up with your permission, Madam Chair, I know Paul had some additional comments, so I'd be happy to defer to Paul before answering any questions.
Yes, thank you, Paul. I'm looking forward to recognizing you.
Yeah, Commissioners, I wanted to make some remarks regarding a funding augmentation in the budget for zero emission rail. Unlike the general fund augmentations that Keith and others have discussed, this funding did not revert, so it was included in the final budget. The augmentation includes $280 million from the public transportation account for CalSTA for zero emission intercity rail and bus rolling stock and funding new service expansion. Commission staff are working with Caltrans to identify the impacts that this augmentation will have on the STIP fund estimate that you adopted at our August meeting. At that time, Caltrans had identified no new funding capacity for STIP transit projects from the public transportation account. Therefore, we're working with Caltrans to determine how this $280 million augmentation will affect funds that are already committed to transit projects, as assumed in the STIP fund estimate, and we'll be reporting back at a future commission meeting. Thanks.
Wonderful. I had just one question, and that was about the broadband funding and whether or not, as you're looking at the implementation, how you are working within the construction for other roadways so that you're doing kind of dig once and making sure that this isn't an challenge when you're looking at broadband, EV connectivity, and then stormwater. How do we dig once?
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. And I can definitely gather more information from our broadband program experts. In general, what we are working with right now is both California Department of Technology and the CPUC to identify those locations, the priority locations, so we can begin the design and basically the construction process. For those locations where we do have existing projects, we would look to potentially whether we amend it in or we just look to see what we can do to build it into those existing projects. So to your point, dig once. While we're there, let's get it involved. So part of it is we may have dedicated projects to just broadband for those areas where we don't have those active projects. But if we're able to incorporate those to existing contract or existing projects, we will be making every effort to do that for an efficiency purposes.
Fantastic. I see that we have no public comment on this item. So if there are no commissioners who wish to speak, we will move on to item 15. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Keith and Paul. Paul?
Commissioners, tab 15 is an action item to accept the staff report on state legislation, state and federal legislation. The 2021 state legislature finished its session on September 10th, and the deadline for the governor to sign bills was October 10th. I'd like to highlight two bills that passed the legislature and were signed into law by the governor that have significant implications for the commission. First, as Director Weiss mentioned in his remarks, SB 339 by Senator Wiener authorizes a new road charge pilot program to test revenue collection. And this bill implements a recommendation that the commission made to the legislature in its 2020 annual report. The commission supported this bill, and commission staff had served as lead witness in support as the bill moved through the committee process. Commission staff are underway working on an implementation plan for the Commission and the Road Charge Technical Advisory Committee's roles in the bill. And this will be discussed in more detail at the next Road Charge Technical Advisory Committee meeting on October 29th. And the second bill I'd like to highlight is SB 671 by Senator Gonzalez. This bill would require the Commission to oversee the development of a clean freight corridor efficiency assessment that would identify, among other items, freight corridors throughout the state that would be priority candidates for the deployment of zero-emission medium and heavy-duty vehicles. And Commission staff also are underway working on an implementation plan, and we'll report back with more information at a future Commission meeting. And regarding federal matters, as you heard from Keith and previous speakers, the infrastructure bill is still pending in Congress. And as we've discussed previously, we've been communicating our priorities to the federal government with CalSTA and Caltrans throughout this year. And finally, regarding the state budget and the outcome of the budget augmentations, there was discussion during the commissioner reports in tab 5 about new funding requests for active transportation program and transit projects in the STIP. So I will stop my remarks here and recommend you approve this item.
Great. Could we have Commissioner Alvarado reread his motion, since this is going to be an action item? We've held it on the desk. And just to make sure that the public and the commissioners know what we're voting. Oh, you're breaking my heart, Commissioner Alvarado.
Commissioner Falcone forced me to go to the closet.
Do we have dress code?
I want you to understand that we baseball fans completely understand that last year was an aberration.
Oh, ouch.
So,
this may affect my vote.
We'll find out tomorrow night. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read what was sent out to the commissioner so that everybody is on the same page.
Yep.
I'd like to direct staff to seek augmentation for $2 billion for ATP, the same as our request from past spring. $1.5 billion for current backlog of projects. Applications are already reviewed and projects ready to be funded. $500 million for bike highways, low stress bike networks. Those are the new transformative pilot programs. A new request for $2.5 billion for the STIP transit. That would go for new projects and could accelerate some existing projects. Funds would be spread across the state through STIP regional shares, would help address issues with lack of funding for STIP transit projects from the public transportation account. Our request is in addition to the $2.5 billion that the governor had proposed for transit Olympic projects in the TIRCP and could complement that funding. By the way, we want to thank the governor for that $2.5 billion. But we have a surplus in the general fund, and we think it would be well served to put some of that to transportation. So would you want that as a separate motion, or could I include that into the motion to adopt staff recommendation?
If this is your motion, we can have this be your motion and Carl re-second it so that we can vote on the language that you've just written. Okay. I mean, read off.
Very good. That would be my motion.
Okay.
And I'm honored to re-second my motion, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. Douglas, could you please read the roll?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner Alvarado.
I've got a question, just a clarification, so I make sure I understand this. Can I ask?
Okay. Before we read the roll, I'll recognize Commissioner Liu and Commissioner Grisby.
The second bullet item that says 2.5 billion for STIP transit, does that mean all the funding would go to transit projects?
Yep.
Paul, do you want to answer Commissioner Luke's question?
Yes, that's my understanding of the motion. It would be within the STIP, all for transit projects.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Commissioner Grisby, did you wish to speak on this item as well?
I didn't know. Thank you.
Okay, great. We have a public comment on this item. Justin, do you want to recognize a public commenter?
Thank you, Chair Norton. I see at this time we have two attendees with their hands raised. Up first, we have Jonathan Matt. You're free to unmute yourself.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, hello, thanks. My name is Jonathan Matz, California Senior Policy Manager of the Safe Routes Partnership. Thanks for having us. I wanted to express our enthusiasm, particularly for the STIP transit funds. We're glad to see that, as well as the ATP augmentation funds. We hope that in formulation of the details of that request, that active transportation groups be consulted, and then make sure that we do the proper. We obviously support the projects in Cycle 5 and agencies that thought they had augmentation funds coming to them, as well as think about how we can best make sure that Cycle 6 is successful and can fund the excellent applications that we expect them as well. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment, Mr. Mess. Next comment.
Up next, we have Julia Randolph.
Hello, can you hear me?
We sure can.
Julia Randolph with the Coalition for Clean Air. I just wanted to come on and echo the comments made by Jonathan Matz. We're very excited about the STIP funding and, the wanting to repropose this again, and just wanting to echo the fact that, that we be consulted, and, we've already been in conversations with staff, and we really appreciate how great that they have been in keeping in contact with us. And we're hoping that, last time we didn't really have a full group measure. I know that was something a commissioner stated that they wanted, that we all come in together as a team so that, we can make sure that this gets accomplished. I'm hoping that we can do that this time around and, keep working together in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Inman, I see you on video.
Yeah, I just want to ask a question. It kind of ties back to the 280 million allocation. And I guess my question, and I don't know that Paul has the answer to this, are there any other funds? I mean, in August, I'm not sure between August and now how we identified this amount of funding, but are there any other funds that we could put to work? Because it seems like we really we have a sense of urgency to get going on a lot of these different tranches of investments. So are there any other funds that we could get access to?
So yeah, the commission just adopted the fund estimate, which has all the funds in the state highway account and the public transportation account and the road maintenance and rehabilitation account. As I mentioned, we're working with Caltrans to figure out exactly where the 280 million comes from in the public transportation account. I'm not aware of any other, transportation funds that are available at the moment, which is why I think that the motion that's been made is for general fund augmentation.
Okay, well, let's just double check and make sure there isn't anything that we aren't putting to work that we could put to work.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll be following up with Caltrans.
Yeah, and I want to clarify that this is also in support of the previous request for, with the governor's budget for the TIRCP money for the Olympics. So thank you very much for clarifying that, Commissioner Alvarado. We have a motion and a second. And so I believe, do we have any more public comment, Justin?
Chair Norton, we have received one additional written comment at this time. It comes from Nicole Chang. She writes, "Hello, I am Nicole, a policy assistant with Climate Plan. I want to echo the enthusiasm, appreciation, and comments from Jonathan and Julia Randolph. Thank you for the conversation so far, and we hope the conversations continue. Thank you."
Fantastic. With that, Douglas, would you please read the roll?
Commissioner Alvarado,
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Davis.
Aye.
Commissioner Eager.
Aye.
Commissioner Falcone.
Aye.
Commissioner Grisby.
Aye.
Commissioner Guardino.
Aye.
Commissioner Inman.
Aye.
Commissioner Liu.
Aye.
Commissioner Martinez. Commissioner Martinez. Commissioner Tavaloni. Chair Norton.
Aye.
Chair, the motion is approved.
Wonderful. Well, with that, I would like to offer that we break for lunch. It is now 1 o'clock and we will come back at 1:30. Thank you very much.